The one responsible thing my wife did after cheating on me became the exact thing that ended our marriage. She got an STD test to protect me, and that single act of conscience was the receipt I never asked for but couldn't unsee. So here's what happened. My wife went to Vegas for a friend's bachelorette week, came back a different person, and I found a hospital bill for an STD screening hidden in her purse. She confessed everything. And I made her believe that confessing to our families would save us, but what she didn't know was that I already had divorce papers in my back pocket. The confession wasn't reconciliation. It was sentencing. I'm 37 male. My wife is Dove, also 37, 16 years together, gone. Priya is the bride whose bachelorette party started all of this. Arjun is my divorce lawyer, an old school junior. And Neil is my best friend who let me crash at his place, recently divorced himself, so he knew the drill. Dove and I met when we were 21. College sweethearts, the kind people point to at weddings and say, times see it does happen, asterisk. 16 years. A son. A house with a garden she designed herself, every plant chosen because it meant something. Jasmine for devotion. Lavender for calm. I used to joke that our backyard was a love letter I couldn't read. I need you to understand that before I tell you what she did. The Vegas trip was Priya's idea. Priya, who I'd met exactly twice, and both times left the conversation feeling like I'd been assessed and dismissed. She was Dove's school friend, the kind of friend who resurfaces every few years, with an energy that rearranges the furniture in your wife's personality. When Dove told me it was a full week in Vegas for Priya's bachelorette, I raised an eyebrow. 1 week seemed excessive. Dove laughed and said Priya doesn't do anything small. I said fine. I trusted her. That's not a figure of speech. I trusted Dove the way you trust the ground beneath your feet. You don't think about it. You just walk. She flew out on a Saturday. The first 2 days, normal texts. Photos of the group at dinner at the pool, matching robes. Day 3, the texts got shorter. Day 4, she called me at midnight, voice thick, and said she missed me. Something in the way she said it made my chest tighten, but I told myself it was wine and distance. Day 5, almost nothing. Day 6, a single heart emoji at 11 p.m. Day 7, she came home. I picked her up at the airport. She hugged me like she was trying to climb inside my ribcage, and then she pulled away too fast. In the car, she stared out the window. I asked about the trip. She said it was fun. I asked about Priya. She said Priya was happy. I asked if something was wrong. She said she was just tired. That night, I reached for her in bed. She flinched. Actually flinched. Her shoulder jerked away from my hand like I'd touched a burn. She apologized immediately, said her back was sore from the flight. I let it go. 3 days passed. She moved through the house like a ghost wearing my wife's clothes. Cooked dinner but didn't eat. Played with our son, but her laughter had a half-second delay like she was translating from a language she'd forgotten. She showered twice a day, long showers, door locked, which she'd never done. And she wouldn't look at me. Not really. Her eyes would land somewhere near my face and slide off like I was too bright to stare at directly. On the 4th day, I found it. I wasn't snooping. I want that on the record. She'd asked me to grab her wallet from her purse because the delivery guy was at the door. I opened the bag, moved aside, a makeup pouch, and there it was. A folded hospital bill from a clinic 15 minutes from our house. STD panel. Comprehensive. Booked. The day after she landed. My hands went still. The delivery guy rang the bell again. I stood in our hallway holding that piece of paper, and the house went completely silent inside my skull, like someone had pulled a plug. I paid for the food. I put the bill back exactly where I found it. I ate dinner across from her and tasted nothing. That night, I lay beside her and stared at the ceiling for 6 hours straight. The next morning, I started looking. Her phone, nothing. She'd wiped it clean, which was itself a confession. Her Instagram DMs, nothing. Her call log, nothing except a 40-minute call to Priya the night she came back. I checked our shared credit card. Normal charges, restaurants, a spa, a club. Nothing that screamed infidelity, but the STD test screamed it. One piece of evidence sitting alone in a field of silence louder than 100 texts could have been. I went online. I read forums, threads, stories from men who'd found exactly what I found. The pattern was surgical in its consistency, the distance, the flinching, the excessive showering, the phone wipe. I wasn't special. I wasn't an exception. I was a statistic. By the 5th night, I couldn't carry it anymore. We were at the dinner table. Our son was at my mother's for the evening. Dove was pushing rice around her plate, and I watched her hand tremble just slightly, just enough, and I felt something in me snap clean through. How was your STD test? 4 words. Her fork stopped midair. The color left her face in a wave top to bottom like watching a tide go out. She didn't ask times, "What are you talking about, asterisk?" She didn't deny it. She set the fork down with a precision that told me she'd been rehearsing this moment in her head for days. And then she told me everything. The bachelorette group went to a male strip club. Priya's idea. Things escalated. Private rooms. An intimate massage that Dove swore she tried to stop, but didn't. And then because she told herself the line was already crossed, she didn't stop what came after either. One night, one man. She said his name and I held up my hand because I physically could not hear it. She was sobbing, shaking. She said Priya had pressured everyone that she'd been drinking, that she hated herself, that getting the test was the first thing she did because she couldn't bear the thought of hurting me that way too. I sat there, very still. And behind the devastation, something cold and architectural was already forming in my mind. The next evening, Arjun, my old school junior, now a divorce lawyer, asked me to meet for a drink. So the last evening, Dove confessed her cheating, and the next evening, I was sitting with my lawyer and discussing my divorce. He asked me to sleep over my decision and see if the emotion subsided, and I decided to give her a chance. I told him that I was mindfully making this decision. I relayed my divorce terms to him, and he assured me of starting the paperwork immediately. I requested him to fast-track the process because I want to get done with it as soon as possible. Anyone who heard me would have assumed I was making an impulsive decision, but I was not. I love Dove, but not more than my self-respect. I told him that I trusted Dove with my life, and if I'm taking this decision, it is definitely severe. I cannot let her get away with the cheating. The papers would be ready in 72 hours. I drove home. Dove was sitting on the couch, eyes swollen, waiting. She asked if I'd left her. I sat down beside her. I took her hand, and I told her there was a way we could survive this, but only if she was brave enough to confess everything in person to both our families. Her eyes searched my face for the trap. She didn't find it. She said yes. I spent the next 3 days being the husband she thought she still had. I cooked for her. I let her fall asleep with her head on my shoulder while we watched television. On the second night, she reached for me in bed, tentative, trembling, her fingers tracing my collarbone like she was asking permission to exist near me, and I let her. I held her afterward while she cried into my chest and whispered times, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," times like a prayer she'd been saving. I stroked her hair and stared at the wall behind her and felt absolutely nothing. That's not true. I felt something. I felt the architectural thing, the cold scaffolding I'd been building since the dinner table lock into its final position. On the third morning, Arjun texted me a single word times, ready, asterisk. I called both sets of parents that afternoon. Told them we needed a family sit-down, something important. My mother asked if everything was okay. I said Dove and I had something to share. Dove's mother asked the same question, and Dove, standing beside me gripping the kitchen counter, said yes, everything would be okay, that this was about healing. Healing. She actually used that word. We held it at our house, the garden house. Jasmine and lavender in full bloom outside the windows, the whole backyard, exhaling devotion and calm, while I arranged chairs in the living room like a courtroom gallery. My parents arrived first, then hers. Her father shook my hand at the door and said, "Whatever this is, I'm glad you two are facing it together." I smiled at him. I have never hated myself more than in that specific smile. Dove sat in the center of the room. I sat beside her, close supportive, my hand on her knee. The families watched us, with the nervous reverence people reserve for couples announcing pregnancies or diagnoses. Dove looked at me. I nodded. She began. She told them everything. The strip club, the private room, the massage that became something else, the man whose name I still cannot hear. She told them about the drinking, about Priya's pressure, about the moment she decided the line was already crossed, so she might as well keep walking. She told them about the STD test, that she'd gotten it immediately, that she'd wanted to protect me even while destroying me. She told them she was sorry. She told them she loved me. She told them I had given her the chance to earn forgiveness by being honest here, in front of everyone, and that she was taking it because I was the only thing in her life worth being brave for. Her mother was crying. Her father's jaw was set so tight I could see the vein in his temple. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My father stared at the floor. Dove finished. She turned to me, eyes raw, face open, and she looked, "God help me," times relieved, asterisk, like she'd climbed the mountain, like the worst was over. I reached into the bag beside my chair and pulled out the envelope. "These are the divorce papers," I said. Arjun drafted them. "The terms are fair. I'm not asking for the house. I'm not contesting custody. We'll share it equally. I want this settled in 45 days. The room didn't gasp. It didn't erupt. It simply stopped the way a heart stops, one moment of rhythm, and then silence so complete you can hear the blood settling. Dove stared at the envelope, then at me, then at the envelope again. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I watched her eyes track backward through the last 3 days, the cooking, the shoulder, the night in bed, the times, thank you, thank you, thank you times, and I watched her understand. "You planned this," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She signed immediately. No argument, no negotiation, no scene. She took the pen from the table, opened to the flagged pages, and signed her name in handwriting so steady it terrified me. Then she set the pen down, stood up, and walked to the bedroom. The door closed with a click. Her parents left without speaking to me. Her father paused at the threshold and looked back, not with anger, but with something worse. Recognition. Like he understood exactly what I'd done and exactly why, and the understanding gave him no comfort at all. My mother touched my arm and said, "Was this necessary?" I said yes. She didn't ask again. The divorce settled in 45 days. Uncontested. Arjun handled everything with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd seen the surgery before and knew which cuts were clean and which ones scarred. Dove and I communicated through lawyers. She never called. Never texted. Never showed up at Neil's apartment where I'd been sleeping on an air mattress surrounded by another man's divorce boxes. The silence from her was so total it had its own weight, its own weather. We passed each other once at the courthouse. She was wearing the blue kurta I'd bought her for our anniversary. I don't know if that was deliberate. I don't know which answer would be worse. She looked at me. Times looked not the sliding off gaze from before, and I saw something in her face that I will carry until I die. Not hatred, not grief. Comprehension. She understood me completely, finally, and the understanding was the loneliest thing I'd ever seen. I drove home Neil's home and sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes. Here is what I know. I love Dove. I love Dove. Those are not contradictory statements, and they do not change anything. I engineered her humiliation in front of the people she loved most because I needed her to feel publicly and irreversibly the weight of what she'd done. I told myself it was self-respect. Maybe it was. Maybe self-respect and cruelty share a border so thin you can't see it until you've already crossed. My son starts kindergarten in September. He will grow up shuttling between 2 houses, 2 bedrooms, 2 versions of why mommy and daddy don't live together anymore. I will have to build him an answer that doesn't include the word times, revenge times, even though some nights alone on that air mattress, I suspect that's exactly what it was. The jasmine in the garden is still blooming. I drove past the house last week. She hasn't pulled it out. I don't know what that means. I don't know if I want to. My wife's brother moved in with us 3 months ago. Except he wasn't her brother, and he wasn't gay. And everything I thought I knew about the woman I married was a lie she'd been building since before our first date. So here's the short version. My wife convinced me to take in her supposedly disowned brother who was fresh out of rehab. Turns out he was actually her drug addict boyfriend she never broke up with, and she fabricated an entire family backstory, conservative parents, a painful estrangement, all of it just to keep this man close while married to me. I'm 32 male. My wife is Renee, 28, and genuinely one of the sharpest people I've ever met, which makes all of this worse. The man she moved into our home is Marco, 27, and her parents, Gerald and Diane, are the warm, lovely people Renee told me she'd been disowned by. They hadn't disowned anyone. They didn't even know Marco existed. Let me back up to where this started because the lie didn't begin with Marco moving in. It began on our second date. Renee told me about her family over cheap pasta at a place that doesn't exist anymore. She said her parents were deeply conservative, the kind who monitored her phone until she was 20, who refused to let her study out of state, who saw any deviation from their plan as betrayal. She said she'd clawed her way out, moved cities, cut contact, built herself from nothing. I remember sitting across from her thinking, times this woman is extraordinary. Asterisk. She told me her younger brother had come out as gay and her parents had disowned him completely, changed the locks, removed his photos. She said she'd tried to intervene and they'd cut her off too. She cried telling me this. Real tears, or what I believed were real tears. Her voice cracked in the right places. Her hands shook holding her wine glass. I fell in love with her courage before I fell in love with her. We married 14 months later. Her family didn't attend the wedding. I never questioned it. Why would I? The story was airtight. She had a stepbrother named Ryan from Gerald's first marriage, and she'd mentioned him exactly twice in passing enough to establish he existed, never enough for me to dig. I realize now she rationed every detail like someone managing inventory. Then 3 months ago, she told me her brother had finally gone to rehab. She said he'd reached out. She said he had nowhere to go. She asked if we could take him in temporarily, just until he got stable. His name was Marco. I said yes because I loved her, and because I thought I was helping someone she loved. Marco arrived with a duffel bag and the kind of exhaustion that made him look 10 years older than 27. He was polite, quiet, grateful. He called me man a lot. He slept on our pull-out couch and did the dishes without being asked. But things didn't sit right almost immediately. The first thing was the name. Renee's last name before marriage was Bellamy. Her parents were the Bellamys. Marco's last name, which I saw on a piece of mail that arrived for him in our mailbox the second week, was Reyes. I asked Renee about it casually. She said he'd legally changed it after the disownment wanted nothing to do with the family name. I nodded. Filed it away. The second thing was the whispering. They whispered constantly. In the kitchen when I was in the living room. On the balcony when I was showering. Once I came home early and they were sitting on the couch with a gap between them that looked recently manufactured, like two magnets pulled apart by a third hand. Marco stood up too fast. Renee smiled too wide. The third thing was that Marco never talked about the family. Not once. A man supposedly disowned by his parents, freshly sober, living in his sister's apartment, and he never mentioned them. Never said their names. Never expressed anger or grief, or anything at all about the people who'd supposedly destroyed his life. I posted about it online. Anonymous, vague, just the broad strokes, wife's brother living with us, different surname, weird energy, constant private conversations. The responses split into two camps. Half said I was paranoid. The other half sent me links to threads I wish I'd never read. Wives who'd moved lovers into the family home disguised as cousins, brothers, old college friends. The playbook was almost standardized. Fabricate a sympathetic backstory. Exploit the husband's empathy. Install the other man under his roof. I read those threads for 4 hours. My hands were steady the entire time. Something in me had already known. I started building my case quietly. I asked Marco if he'd be willing to put together a resume so I could help him find work. He agreed. The resume listed his education, his work history, his full legal name, Marco Antonio Reyes. No mention of Bellamy. No name change documentation. The timeline of his employment showed continuous residence in a city 4 hours from Renee's hometown. He hadn't grown up where she grew up. He hadn't grown up in her family at all. That weekend, I told Renee I had a work trip near her hometown. I suggested she come along so we could visit her parents. I framed it casually already, knowing she'd refuse proximity to her actual parents was the one variable she couldn't control, so it was easier for her to say no. As expected, she said she was busy, but she kept asking me if I would be visiting her parents. I said no, I won't visit them alone. We can plan for the next time. In reality, I had no work trip. I went to her hometown only to meet her parents and uncover her truth. I don't want to get into the details of how I sourced their address. It was on her ID. So I went to their house and immediately told them not to reveal this to Renee because I was planning a surprise for her. Renee's birthday was around the corner a day after tomorrow. So I told them that I was arranging a surprise party for Renee and went there to invite them in person. They were pleased to receive me. Gerald shook my hand with both of his. Diane hugged me in the doorway. Their home was warm, cluttered with family photos, and nothing times about these people suggested the cold, controlling fundamentalists Renee had described. While speaking to them, I eventually opened up and told them that they don't seem conservative at all, not the way Renee had described. Gerald's face changed. Diane set down her tea. Conservative, Gerald said. We begged that girl to stay. I asked about their son. Gerald said, Ryan's in Seattle. We talk every Sunday. I asked carefully if they had another son, a younger one, named Marco. They looked at each other, then back at me, who Diane said slowly is Marco. I drove back to the hotel that night with every window down 80 miles an hour on an empty highway, and the only thought cycling through my head was this. Right now in my apartment, in the home I pay for, Renee and Marco are alone together. And they know exactly what they are to each other. Her birthday was in 2 days, and her parents had just accepted my invitation. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger. Anger would have been simpler. I lay in that hotel bed running the math on every conversation, every tear, every perfectly rationed detail she'd fed me over 3 years, and what kept me awake was the precision. This wasn't impulsive. This was architecture. I drove home the next morning, one day before her birthday. Marco was eating cereal at the kitchen counter, and Renee was blow-drying her hair in the bathroom. Everything looked normal. Everything had always looked normal. That was the craft of it. How was the trip, she asked when I kissed her cheek. Productive, I said. Actually, I want to do something special for your birthday tomorrow. Stay home. I'll handle everything. She smiled. The same smile from our second date, the one I'd once mistaken for vulnerability. You don't have to do all that. I want to, I said. I really want to. I spent that day in a kind of surgical calm. I bought a cake. I ordered flowers. I texted Gerald and Diane the address and the time 6 o'clock come straight up the door would be open. Diane sent back a string of heart emojis and wrote that she couldn't wait to see her baby girl. I stared at that message for a long time. These people loved Renee. They had never stopped. She had invented their cruelty the way a novelist invents weather to set the scene for a character who doesn't exist. The morning of her birthday, Renee woke up happy. She stretched across the bed and pulled me toward her and said, "30 looks good on me, don't you think? I told her it did." Marco knocked on the bedroom door and wished her happy birthday through the wood. She laughed. I watched the ease between them, the familiarity that I'd once read as sibling comfort, and I saw it clearly now. The way her voice softened half a register when she spoke to him. The way his knock was gentle, almost intimate, 2 taps instead of 3. I told her I was handling dinner. She should relax, get dressed up, enjoy the day. She spent the afternoon doing her makeup while Marco sat on the couch scrolling his phone. At one point I walked past and he looked up at me with those tired eyes and said, "This is really cool of you, man." "Family's important," I said. He nodded. He had no idea what he was nodding to. By 5:30, Renee was in a green dress, her hair pinned up, standing in the kitchen, finishing a salad she'd insisted on making because she said she couldn't just contribute nothing. Marco had changed into a clean shirt. The apartment smelled like garlic and candle wax and the ordinary machinery of a life that had never been real. At 5:58, my phone buzzed. Gerald times. We're in the lobby. Asterisk. I told Renee I'd forgotten something in the car and went downstairs. Gerald was wearing a blazer. Diane was holding a wrapped gift with a bow that looked like she'd spent an hour on it. I shook Gerald's hand, hugged Diane, and led them to the elevator. "She's going to be so surprised," Diane whispered. "Yes," I said. "She is." I opened the apartment door and stepped aside. Diane walked in first. Then Gerald. The hallway opens directly into the kitchen and living room, one continuous space, and Renee was standing at the counter with a knife in one hand and a tomato in the other, and Marco was 3 feet away leaning against the fridge. Diane said, "Baby?" Renee's head turned. The knife stopped. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her eyes went from her mother to her father to me, and I watched the blood leave her face in real time like someone had pulled a plug at the base of her throat. Gerald stepped forward, arms open, and then he saw Marco. He stopped. His arms lowered. "What are you doing here?" Gerald said. Not to Renee, to Marco. Marco straightened. His mouth opened. Closed. "You know each other," I said. I already knew, but I needed the room to hear it. "That's Marco Reyes," Gerald said, his voice flattening into something I hadn't heard from him before. "He's the reason we almost lost our daughter." Renee set the knife down. Her hands were shaking. "Dad, let me." "He's been living here," I said, "for 3 months. Renee told me he was your son, that you disowned him for being gay." The silence that followed had texture. Diane's gift hit the floor. Gerald turned to Renee with an expression I can only describe as a man watching something he built catch fire. "Oh," I said, "Ryan didn't come." "It would have made things easier, isn't it?" Renee flinched, like I'd struck her. Gerald crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, grabbed Marco by the collar of his clean shirt, and dragged him toward the door. Marco didn't resist. He went limp the way someone goes limp when they've always known this moment was coming. Gerald shoved him into the hallway and pointed at the elevator and said something quiet I couldn't hear, and Marco walked away without looking back. Diane was crying. Renee was standing in her green birthday dress in the kitchen she'd been cooking in 2 minutes ago, and she looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw her without a story prepared. "How long?" she whispered. "Long enough," I said. The divorce took 11 weeks. She signed everything without contest. No negotiation, no lawyers jousting over assets. She showed up to the finalization alone, thinner, wearing no makeup. She didn't look at me. Gerald removed her from the family will. I know this because Diane called me 3 weeks after it was finalized, sobbing into the phone. She said Marco had relapsed. She said Renee was still with him. She said she didn't understand how her daughter, her brilliant, sharp, capable daughter, could throw away everything for a man who couldn't stay clean for 6 consecutive months. I didn't have an answer for her. I still don't. What I keep coming back to is this. Renee built an entire mythology. Cold parents, a disowned brother, a woman who'd clawed her way to freedom, and she built it so well that I married the character, not the person. Every detail measured, every tear placed. The woman I admired for her resilience was real, in a way I hadn't understood. She was times resilient. She maintained a lie across years, across a marriage, across the daily architecture of a shared life without a single crack I could see until a piece of mail arrived with the wrong name. That's not weakness. That's a kind of terrifying talent. And she spent all of it on Marco Reyes, a man who the last I heard was sleeping on someone's floor. I think about that sometimes. How the sharpest person I've ever known made the dumbest choice I've ever seen and made it over and over and over again and called it love. Here's the truth. Nobody wants to hear you can tell someone exactly who you are on day one, lay every boundary on the table, and they'll still act blindsided when you refuse to light yourself on fire to keep their family warm. I told my husband I never wanted children. He said he understood. Turns out he was just waiting for the right moment to pretend that conversation never happened. So when his daughter demanded I quit my career to raise her baby full-time and he backed her up like I was the unreasonable one, I learned something brutal about the man I married. I'm a 38-year-old woman with no kids by choice. My husband is Sam, 47, a devoted father whose devotion has no off switch. His daughter is Leah, 25, a new mom still chasing a deadbeat ex named Derek who vanished. The second things got real. Sam and I met at a conference in Denver 4 years ago. He was charming, graying at the temples, and honest about his life. Divorced, one daughter, still healing from losing his first wife to cancer when Leah was 14. I was honest too. Over our second dinner before he even reached for the check, I told him plainly, I don't want children. Not eventually. Not under the right circumstances. Not ever. He set his fork down, looked me in the eye, and said, I already have my kid. I'm not looking for another one. That sentence was the foundation of everything. We built a marriage on it. What I didn't fully understand at the time was that I already have my kid didn't mean what I thought it meant. It didn't mean his chapter of active parenting was closed. It meant Leah was the son, and everything else, including me, was expected to orbit. I liked Leah in the beginning. She was guarded, which I respected. She didn't call me mom, which I preferred. We had a workable distance. I came to her college graduation. She came to our wedding. We exchanged birthday texts that were polite and brief. It wasn't warm, but it was functional, and I thought functional was enough. Then Derek happened. Derek was the kind of man who makes promises in bed and breaks them in daylight. Leah fell for him catastrophically, moved in after 3 months, got pregnant after 7, and was alone by month 9. He didn't even have the decency to leave a note. Just stopped answering his phone one Tuesday and never started again. Sam drove 4 hours to pack up her apartment. He moved her into our guest room. He converted the office into a nursery. I didn't object to any of it. She was in crisis, and I understood that family shows up during crisis. I helped paint the nursery walls. I assembled the crib with an Allen wrench and a YouTube tutorial. I drove her to 2 of her prenatal appointments when Sam had work conflicts. But I never agreed to become a mother. Not once. The baby came a boy, Caleb, and for the first 12 weeks, the house was a fog of feedings and crying, and Sam hovering over Leah like she might shatter. I gave them space. I picked up groceries. I kept the house running. I figured Leah would stabilize, find childcare, go back to work, and eventually get her own place. Instead, her maternity leave ended, and the real nightmare began. It started as a suggestion over dinner. Leah was bouncing Caleb on her knee, and Sam cleared his throat the way he does when he's rehearsed something. We've been talking, he said, and we think it makes the most sense if you stayed home with Caleb while Leah goes back to work. I actually laughed. Not cruelly, I genuinely thought it was a joke. Nobody else laughed. I'm not quitting my job, Sam. It wouldn't be quitting. It'd be a pause. A pause. From my career to raise someone else's child. Leah's face crumpled immediately. Someone else's child. He's your Times grandson, asterisk. He's not my grandson, Leah. I care about him, but I'm not his grandmother. I'm your father's wife. The silence that followed had weight. Sam's jaw tightened. Leah pulled Caleb closer like I'd threatened him. Over the next 2 weeks, I offered every alternative I could think of. Daycare, too impersonal, he's too young. A nanny, a stranger, raising my baby, absolutely not. Reduced hours for Leah, I just got this position, I can't go part-time. I even suggested Sam cut back his own schedule since he worked remotely 3 days a week. He looked at me like I'd suggested he set the house on fire. I brought up child support. Derek had legal obligations whether he wanted them or not. That's when the real picture came into focus. Leah's eyes went glassy and she shook her head so fast it was almost a tremor. I'm not dragging Derek through court. Leah, he owes. He's going through stuff. He'll come back when he's ready. She still loved him. She was still waiting. Filing for child support would mean admitting Derek wasn't coming home, and she couldn't do that. Every practical solution I offered collapsed against the same wall, Leah's fantasy that her life would reassemble itself around a man who had already proven he didn't want to be in it. And Sam enabled every inch of it. He wouldn't push Leah on child support because it upset her. He wouldn't consider a nanny because Leah didn't want one. He wouldn't reduce his own hours because, and he actually said this, someone has to keep this household funded. The implication was suffocating. Asterisk. Someone times, meaning him. My salary apparently was optional, disposable, a hobby that could be shelved. Then came the night Leah played her ace. We were arguing in the kitchen, Sam and I voices low but sharp, when Leah appeared in the doorway holding Caleb against her shoulder. You know what? Her voice was trembling theatrical. If my mom were alive, she would have had my back. She wouldn't have even had to be asked. Sam's entire body shifted toward his daughter. His eyes went soft and wet. And just like that, I was no longer his wife in that room. I was the woman standing where his dead ex-wife should have been failing to fill a ghost's shoes. 3 days later, Sam sat me down with a plan he'd written on a legal pad. I stared at the yellow paper, at his handwriting, at the numbers that erased me completely, and I realized this was never a conversation. It was a sentencing. The legal pad had 3 columns: expenses, timeline, my role. Under expenses, Sam had listed mortgage, utilities, groceries, Caleb's pediatric visits, diapers, formula. My name appeared nowhere in the expense column because I wasn't an expense. I was a solution times to times expenses. Under timeline, return to workforce when Caleb enters pre-K, age 4 to 5. 4 to 5 years. Written in his neat engineer's print like it was a project milestone. Under my role, a single line: full-time caregiver, household management. No retirement contributions. No savings plan. No income replacement. No acknowledgement that I had a 401k I'd been building for 16 years, a senior analyst position I'd fought for through 2 company mergers, or a professional identity that existed before Sam's daughter decided a stranger shouldn't raise her baby, but her stepmother could. This is the plan, he said. Not times a, times plan. Asterisk. The times plan. Where's my retirement in this, Sam? We'll figure that out later. Later when I'm 43 with a 5-year gap on my resume and no savings. You're being dramatic. I'm being times a mathematical asterisk. Show me where I exist on this page. He tapped the legal pad. You exist right here. With this family. That's where you exist. That's not a financial plan. That's a guilt trip formatted in columns. His hand came down flat on the table. I have bent over backward to make you feel included in this family. Leah is struggling. Caleb needs stability. And you're sitting here counting your retirement like some what? Say it. He didn't. He didn't have to. The word was already in the room. Asterisk. Selfish. Asterisk. It had been circling for weeks and now it landed. I stood up. My chair scraped the tile. I told you in Denver. Before you paid for dinner. Before you kissed me. Before you proposed. I told you I would never be a mother. You said you understood. This isn't about being a mother. This is about being a decent human being. That sentence hit like a closed fist because it reframed everything. Every boundary I'd ever drawn wasn't a boundary anymore. It was evidence of indecency. My entire identity, the one he'd claimed to love, was now the prosecution's exhibit. I went upstairs. I pulled 2 suitcases from the closet. I started with the things that were unquestionably mine: closed documents, the jewelry my mother left me, my laptop, the framed photo of my parents' anniversary that I kept on my nightstand. It took 40 minutes. That's how long it takes to dismantle 4 years of marriage when you never owned the house. Sam appeared in the doorway when I was zipping the second suitcase. He watched me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not regret exactly. More like confusion. The confusion of a man who had genuinely believed the walls would hold. You're really doing this, he said. Over babysitting. I almost screamed. I swallowed it. You wrote a plan where I don't exist, Sam. You handed me a piece of paper that erases my career, my savings, my future, and my autonomy, and you called it times babysitting asterisk. Leah appeared behind him. Caleb was asleep in her arms. She looked at the suitcases and her lip curled not with sadness, but with vindication. Like she'd been waiting for this. Like my leaving proved what she'd always suspected, that I was never really family. I hope you can live with yourself, she said quietly. I hope you learn to live without a safety net, I said back. Because your father won't be here forever, Leah. And Derek isn't coming back. And at some point, you're going to have to figure out how to be responsible for yourself and your child. And no one, not a nanny, not your dad, not the ghost of your mother, is going to do it for you. Her face went white. Sam stepped between us like I'd raised a hand. Get out, he said. I carried my own suitcases down the stairs. Nobody helped. I loaded my car in the dark. The porch light didn't come on. I drove to a hotel off the interstate and sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like industrial detergent. My phone lit up twice. Once from Sam Times. You showed your true colors tonight. Asterisk. Once from Leah. In a group text that included Sam's sister Times. She abandoned us. Caleb's own step-grandmother walked out because she couldn't be bothered. Asterisk. Step-grandmother. A title I never claimed applied retroactively to maximize the betrayal narrative. I didn't respond to either message. Here's what I keep turning over alone in that room, staring at the parking lot, lights bleeding through thin curtains. Sam didn't lie to me in Denver. He believed what he said. He genuinely thought his parenting chapter was closed. But belief isn't the same as commitment. When Leah needed something that required times, my time sacrifice, his belief evaporated like it had never been spoken. The foundation we built our marriage on was made of his convenience, and the moment it became inconvenient, he jackhammered through it without flinching. It seems unrealistic that Leah thought she could have a child without it impacting her career at least a little. Although it's hard for new mothers, it might take time for her to realize Caleb will be loved with or without a nanny. With everything Sam was already doing, converting rooms, covering costs, absorbing her life into his, it seemed staggering that she'd demand more. But Sam made it possible by making it easy. He enabled every refusal, cushioned every consequence, until Leah had no reason to develop the ability to be responsible for herself or her son. And that will not bode well for her down the road. Because Sam is 67% of her support system, and only God knows how long that lasts. Hopefully a very long time. But one never knows. I made the best decision I could for myself. I'm not sure anyone else in that house will understand that. Maybe ever. But I drove away with my name intact, my career intact, and the quiet, brutal clarity of a woman who told the truth on the first date and was punished for it 4 years later. My lawyer called back the next morning. The marriage on paper was clean. No shared property, no children, no claim. Exactly what I'd walked in with. Exactly what I'd warned him about. She proposed to me at my own birthday party, got down on one knee in front of my entire family, and 2 days later I found out the baby wasn't even mine. Actually, it gets worse. It wasn't his either. So, my girlfriend cheated on me with a wealthy DJ, got pregnant, couldn't pin down who the father was out of at least 4 different men, and then tried to convince me to just raise the baby anyway because I was, and I quote, already here. When I refused, her entire world collapsed, like the house of cards she'd been building for months. I'm 27 male. My girlfriend was me at 25, and I genuinely believe she was the first woman who ever loved me with her whole heart. Then there was the DJ, some rich guy in his 30s who funded me as designer lifestyle until he realized he wasn't the only one funding it. This is how it all started. Mia and I met through mutual friends at a cookout 2 summers ago. She was the kind of woman who made you feel like the only person in the room. Not in a flashy way, she'd just listen. Really listen. She'd remember the small things I said weeks later and bring them up like she'd been holding them close. After a string of relationships where I felt like I was performing for women who were always halfway out the door, Mia felt like finally coming home. We moved in together after 6 months. Too fast, maybe, but everything with her felt urgent and right. We talked about building something real, and within a year, we decided to open a small food truck together. We pooled our savings mine from years of working in logistics, hers from bartending, and for 3 months it actually worked. Then it didn't. Equipment costs spiraled. Permits got delayed. A supplier ghosted us with $2,000 of our money. By the time we shut it down, we were broke in a way that made your chest tight every time you opened your banking app. That's when Mia said she'd pick up a second job. She landed a position as a mixologist at this upscale restaurant downtown. The kind of place with dim lighting and $40 cocktails and men in watches that cost more than my car. I was proud of her. I told her that. She smiled and said, "I'm doing this for us." The first month was fine. She'd come home tired, smelling like citrus and expensive cologne from the clientele, and we'd eat leftovers on the couch and fall asleep watching something stupid on Netflix. Normal. Hours. Then the shifts got longer. She started coming home at 2, 3 in the morning. Some nights she didn't come home at all. The manager asked me to close, she'd say. Or I crashed at my coworker Steph's place because I was too tired to drive. I never questioned it. I'd just pull the blanket back for her when she finally slid into bed. Then the gifts started appearing. A Gucci handbag on the kitchen counter one Tuesday. I picked it up, turned it over. The leather was soft in a way that whispered money. Where'd this come from? Tips have been insane lately, Mia said without looking up from her phone. I treated myself. A week later, Louboutin heels, then a Cartier bracelet, then a new phone. Each time I raised an eyebrow, she had an answer ready. A bonus. A gift from a generous female customer who loved her drinks. A sale she'd found online. The explanations came so smoothly that doubting them felt like doubting her, and doubting her felt like being the kind of jealous, insecure man I'd promised myself I'd never become. So I swallowed it. Every single time. One evening, I picked up her phone to check the time mine was dead, and a WhatsApp notification slid down from the top of the screen. No name saved, just a number. The preview read, "Times. Wore that dress for me tonight, asterisk." My stomach dropped like an elevator with its cables cut. I opened the chat. The messages went back weeks. Photos of Mia in outfits I'd never seen. Photos of a penthouse balcony overlooking the city. Voice notes I couldn't bring myself to play. And a name she used for him in conversation, a DJ so well known in our city that even I recognized it. He'd been buying her everything. The bags, the shoes, the bracelet, all of it. When Mia walked through the door that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone face up between us. She looked at the screen. Then she looked at me. And she laughed. Not nervous laughter. Not guilty laughter. She laughed like I'd told a joke she found mildly amusing. You went through my phone. Who is he, Mia? He's nobody. He buys me things. That's it. That's it. He buys me things and I let him. That's the arrangement. You want me to feel bad about that? She picked up the phone and dropped it in her purse. We're broke. Remember? Or did you forget whose food truck idea put us here? That one landed exactly where she aimed it. So, you'd rather have his gifts than what? Your pride? She tilted her head. Baby, his gifts pay our bills. Your pride doesn't. I packed a bag that night and drove to my cousin's apartment across town. I didn't cry. I just drove with both hands on the wheel and a hollow ringing in my ears, like something had detonated inside my skull. Distancing myself from her like that was not something I was used to. A second week passed, and I still didn't hear from her. Meanwhile, she constantly posted on Facebook and WhatsApp and didn't look like she missed me. In the third week, just when I decided to go back home and confront her, Mia called me. When she called me, she sounded very different and asked me to come home so we could iron things out between us. Eventually, I went home that day, and as soon as I stepped inside her house, she hugged me tightly. Once we settled down, Mia began to tell me how selfish and stupid she had been, and she was sorry for hurting my feelings with her actions. She told me she returned all the gifts because she realized what we had was worth more than any expensive gift. I was so relieved to hear that, and I held her face in my hands and told her we'd figure everything out together. Then she told me she was pregnant. She said it softly like a confession, and a gift wrapped into one sentence. My eyes blurred. I pulled her into me so tight I could feel her heartbeat against my ribs. A baby. Our baby. This was the reset. This was the universe telling us the worst was over. Over the next few weeks, Mia became the woman I'd fallen in love with, multiplied by 10. She cooked for me. She planned nursery colors. She told my mother before I could. And on the night of my 27th birthday, in front of my parents, my cousins, my closest friends, she got down on one knee with a ring she said she'd been saving for and asked me to marry her. The room erupted. My mother cried. I said yes before she even finished the question. 2 days later, I was lying in bed when I heard Mia whispering into her phone in the bathroom. She ended the call the second the door creaked open. Who was that? Wrong number, she said. She smiled. But her hands were shaking. That night after she fell asleep, I reached for her phone. Her passcode hadn't changed. Part of me wondered if she'd forgotten to update it or if she simply didn't think I'd ever look again. The arrogance of that almost stopped me. Almost. I opened WhatsApp. The DJ's number was still there, but now it had a name saved. Just initials. I tapped it. The first message I read was from him times, so he actually said yes to the proposal, asterisk. Mia's reply times, told you he would. He's not going anywhere now. Asterisk. I scrolled. My thumb moved slow, deliberate the way you'd turn pages of something you know is going to gut you, but you need to see every word. The conversation laid it out like a blueprint. The pregnancy wasn't mine. It was the DJ's. Mia had known for weeks before she called me back to the apartment. She'd gone to him first, told him. He'd offered money but made it crystal clear he wasn't leaving his lifestyle for a baby. So Mia pivoted. She came back to me with tears and apologies and a belly full of another man's child, and she repackaged the whole thing as redemption. The proposal wasn't love. It was a padlock. There were voice notes. I played one with the volume barely above silence, her phone pressed to my ear while she slept 3 feet away. His voice times, as long as he thinks it's his, I'll send what I send. But keep my name out of it. Asterisk. Her voice casual, almost bored times. He won't ask questions. He's not that type. Asterisk. He's not that type. I set the phone down on the nightstand screen facing down. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The fan turned in slow circles. Mia's breathing was steady beside me, the kind of deep, unbothered sleep that belongs to someone who believes their plan is working. I didn't wake her. I didn't confront her. I got up, walked to the kitchen, drank a glass of water standing over the sink, and went back to bed. For the next 3 weeks, I was a ghost wearing my own skin. I went to work. I came home. I sat across from her at dinner while she talked about baby names and wedding venues, and I nodded in all the right places. She'd reach for my hand, and I'd let her take it. But something behind my eyes had gone dark, and she started to notice. You've been distant, she said one evening, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Just tired. You're always tired now. Work's been heavy. She watched me for a beat too long, then went back to eating. She didn't push it. Pushing it would have meant risking the structure she'd built, and Mia was too smart for that. On a Sunday morning, I sat on the edge of the bed and said it. I want a paternity test. The silence that followed had a texture. Thick, pressurized, like the air before a storm cell breaks. Mia turned from the mirror where she'd been moisturizing her face. Her hands were still glistening. What? A paternity test. Before the baby comes. Why would you? Her voice cracked. Not from sadness. From calculation breaking down in real time. Why would you ask me that? Because I need to know. You do know. You know this is your baby. You know that. Then the test shouldn't be a problem. That's when the performance started. Tears first instant heavy rolling down her cheeks like she turned on a faucet. Then the accusations. I was paranoid. I was toxic. I was punishing her for the DJ situation that she'd already apologized for. Then insults. I was weak. I was pathetic. No wonder she'd looked elsewhere. Then back to tears, a full cycle in under 5 minutes. I watched all of it like a man watching weather through a window. I'll be gone by morning, I said. You're not going anywhere. I already know Mia. She stopped. Mid-sentence, mid-breath. Her mouth stayed open, but nothing came out. I watched the exact moment she understood that the walls she'd built weren't keeping me in anymore. They were closing in on her. That night I packed while she sat on the couch staring at nothing. I didn't take everything, just what mattered. At the door I left a note on the counter. 4 sentences. I told her I'd read the messages. I told her I knew about the DJ, the money arrangement, the plan to pass off the baby as mine. I told her not to call me. She called 11 times before sunrise. On the 12th call, 2 days later, I answered. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to hear her say it out loud so the last thread of doubt could finally snap. What she said was worse than anything I'd imagined. It's not his either. What? The DJ. He did his own test. It's not his baby. Her voice was flat now, stripped of performance. He's gone. Blocked me on everything. Then whose is it? A long pause. I could hear her breathing ragged and wet. I don't know. There were others. 4 maybe. I don't know which one. I pulled the phone away from my ear. Her voice kept going tinny and small like something trapped in a jar. I brought it back. You could still be the father. You could just be the father. You don't need a test to be a dad. You just need to show up. Please. I'm alone. Everyone left. Steph won't talk to me. My girls found out, and they please. Just come back. You don't even have to love me. Just be here. I listened to every word. I owed myself that hearing the full shape of what I'd almost built my life around. Then I hung up. And I blocked her number. The last thing I heard through mutual friends was that the DJ had already moved cities. 2 of the 4 men she'd named denied ever being with her. Her co-worker Steph had told their entire social circle the truth after Mia tried to borrow money using the pregnancy as leverage. Her friends didn't leave all at once. They left in a slow, disgusted trickle, the way people back away from someone they realized they never actually knew. Mia was left exactly where her own architecture led alone, unemployed, pregnant, by a man she couldn't identify with. Every safety net she'd woven from other people's trust finally unraveled beneath her. I think about it sometimes. Not her. The version of me that sat at that kitchen table the first time and swallowed the lie because the alternative meant admitting that the one person who felt like home was just a house with no foundation. That man doesn't exist anymore. I made sure of it. My wife spent 25 years telling anyone who'd listen that cheaters were the lowest form of human garbage. She'd cut friends out of her life for staying with unfaithful partners. She made loyalty her entire identity. So when I found the emails proving she'd been sleeping with a bankrupt opiate addict she met in AA, I didn't just lose my marriage. I lost my entire understanding of reality. 2 marriages, both destroyed by infidelity. A daughter who flipped her car into a creek because she found her mother's affair before I did. A woman who mocked my deepest wounds while cackling like she'd lost her mind. And somehow, on the other side of all that wreckage, I found the one thing I never believed was possible again. I'm a tech executive in my late 50s, a musician, a woodworker. My wife is Denise. Her affair partner is Rick, a 58-year-old hotel worker she met in recovery. My daughter Ellie was 17 when her world detonated, and Catherine, you'll meet Catherine when the time is right. The first marriage taught me what betrayal felt like. The second taught me I hadn't learned a damn thing. Denise and I met when I was 30. She was beautiful, whip smart, and had opinions that could strip paint. On our third date, she told me about her college roommate who'd taken back a cheating boyfriend. I helped her move out, Denise said, stabbing a piece of salmon with her fork. Not from his apartment, from mine. I don't keep weak people in my life. I remember thinking times, this is the safest woman on earth. Asterisk. She wasn't just loyal, she was militantly loyal. She'd built a fortress around the concept and dared anyone to breach it. We married. Had Ellie. Built 25 years of what I genuinely believed was an unassailable partnership. I played guitar on a weekend, Band-built furniture in the garage, climbed the ladder at a tech firm until I was running divisions. Denise stayed home with Ellie, then got her real estate license. Then, when the drinking got bad enough that she couldn't hide it behind book club anymore, she got sober through AA. I supported every step of that. Drove her to meetings, held her hair back during the detox sweats, told her I was proud of her because I was. What I didn't know was that AA introduced her to Rick. The distance started about 8 months before I found the emails. Subtle at first, she'd come home from meetings energized but evasive, talking about her healing journey in language that felt borrowed from someone else's mouth. Then, less subtle, she started picking fights about nothing. I'd load the dishwasher wrong and get a 20-minute lecture about how I never listened. I'd ask how her day was and she'd say, "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to rebuild yourself from scratch." I thought she was processing sobriety. I gave her space. I gave her grace. She used both to build a runway. One Thursday night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping, not yet. I was looking for a recipe she'd bookmarked, but the browser had her email open, and the preview pane showed a message from a name I didn't recognize. Rick. The email was short. Familiar. The kind of short and familiar that doesn't exist between strangers. I scrolled down and my hands went cold. Not explicit, not in that thread, but intimate in a way that was worse. Inside jokes, pet names. A reference to last Tuesday that made my stomach fold in half because last Tuesday, she'd told me she was at a women's meeting. I made my first critical mistake. I told her what I'd found. The moment the words left my mouth, I watched her face cycle through 3 expressions in under 2 seconds. Shock, calculation, performance. Then the tears came perfectly timed. We kissed once, at a meeting. It was awful and I felt sick and I ended it immediately. She grabbed my hands. She looked me dead in the eyes with a sincerity so convincing I felt guilty for doubting her. "You're the only man I've ever loved. Rick is a broken person and I was trying to help him and it went too far for 1 second and I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." We spent the weekend in what I now call the false reconciliation. Long talks, crying, lovemaking that felt desperate and performative in a way I couldn't name at the time. She said everything right. She always knew what right sounded like, but something gnawed at me. A phrase from one of the emails, time, same room times. You don't write that about a single kiss. The following Monday, while she was at work, I found her old phone in a drawer. She'd factory reset it, but she'd backed up her photos to the cloud and forgotten about the text message archive synced to her tablet. I sat in my workshop sawdust still on my jeans and read 6 months of messages between my wife and a 58-year-old bankrupt opiate addict who worked the front desk of a Comfort Inn. Explicit, detailed, logistical. They had a room. They had a schedule. They had a shorthand for when I was traveling for work. She'd text a single musical note emoji and he'd confirm with a clock. I set the tablet down on my workbench and stared at the wall for what might have been 40 minutes. My hands didn't shake. That's what scared me. I felt like someone had scooped out my chest cavity and replaced it with concrete. When I confronted her with the evidence, the one kiss story evaporated. She cried differently this time, ugly, panicked, real. I told her I was giving her a gift, one chance at reconciliation. Full transparency, full accountability. We'd do the work. She agreed to everything. What neither of us knew was that Ellie had found those same emails weeks before I did. My 17-year-old daughter had been carrying her mother's secret like a grenade with the pin pulled, and nobody heard the explosion until she was upside down in her car, in a creek bed, blood alcohol, twice the legal limit, expelled from National Honor Society pills in her backpack that didn't belong to her. And when Denise found out that Ellie knew, when Ellie screamed at her mother that she was a liar and a hypocrite, and everything she'd ever taught her was garbage, Denise looked at our daughter and said the words that still make my jaw tighten 7 years later. "You are the reason I want to drink." Then she got in her car and peeled out of the driveway so fast the tires left marks on the concrete. Ellie called me sobbing, convinced her mother was going to kill herself, convinced it would be her fault. That's when the inversion happened. Ellie couldn't be angry at Denise. Anger might kill her. So Ellie turned all of it on me, the safe parent, the one who wouldn't self-destruct. Denise let it happen, encouraged it. She started monitoring my posts on an online support forum, feeding details to Ellie out of context, whispering that Dad was airing family business to strangers. One night, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, folded her hands like a therapist, and said, "I've forgiven myself. I think you need to respect that." I stared at her. She stared back, waiting for applause. I gave her a year. 12 months of couples therapy, individual therapy, books, workshops, the whole architecture of reconciliation. I did the work because I loved someone so much it was hard to believe she could ever do the unimaginable. And for 12 months, I waited for her to meet me halfway. Instead, on a Tuesday night in November, she met me at the bottom. We'd been arguing about nothing, a credit card charge maybe, or something equally small. The kind of argument that was never about the thing. It was about, I was standing in the kitchen doorway and she was sitting at the table with a glass of sparkling water, and somewhere in the middle of my sentence she started laughing. Not real laughter, something else. "You want to know what's funny?" she said, and her voice had a quality I'd never heard before, high, brittle, theatrical. "You, walking around this house like some wounded saint. You, with your little forum posts and your therapist and your..." She pressed the back of her hand to her forehead in a mock swoon. "Oh, times Denise hurt me. Denise broke my trust. I gave her everything and she, asterisk..." She was imitating me. Not generically. Specifically. She was using the exact words I'd said in our couple sessions, the exact cadence of things I'd whispered in bed at 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, the precise inflection of my voice when it cracked during our worst conversations. She'd cataloged every moment of vulnerability I'd ever shown her, and she was performing them back to me like a one-woman show. Then came the fake tears. She scrunched her face, made exaggerated sobbing sounds, and actually cackled, head thrown back at the impression. "Do you hear yourself? Do you know what you sound like? You sound like a Times child. Asterisk." My hands were flat on the counter. I remember the grain of the wood under my palms. I remember the hum of the refrigerator. I remember the specific quality of silence inside my own skull when something fundamental rearranges itself. 25 years! Every fear I'd ever confessed, every wound I'd let her see, every night I'd chosen to be soft with her instead of guarded. She'd stored it all. And now she was using it like ammunition. Not because she was angry, but because my pain made her feel powerful. And feeling powerful was easier than feeling ashamed. I looked at her. She was still laughing, but her eyes were watching me the way a person watches when they know they've gone too far and can't stop. "I'm done," I said. Not loud, not dramatic. The quietest sentence I've ever spoken. She stopped laughing. "The divorce cost me $200, 000. I bought out her share of the house and pension because I wanted clean, I wanted surgical. My attorney told me I was overpaying. I said I didn't care. What saved me from financial ruin was absurd. Denise's own appraiser undervalued the house by several $100,000. A professional mistake that amounted to the universe's only act of mercy in the entire process. I signed the papers, wrote the check, and sat alone in a house that smelled like sawdust and 25 years of someone else's perfume. Ellie didn't speak to me for 4 months after the divorce was finalized. Denise had spent those months whispering, not screaming, never screaming, because screaming would have been too obvious. Whispering that I'd abandoned the family, that I'd chosen my pride over her recovery, that a real man would have stayed. I never once told Ellie what her mother had said to me that Tuesday in November. I never told her about the cackling, the mockery, the performance. I just waited. I want to provide a hopeful story to those who need hope. My 2 marriages ended in spousal infidelity, both with kids involved. It was horrible both times. First time after 7 years together, the second after 25. I didn't think I could ever trust again. After lots of therapy, I realized my picker was broken. I was picking women who were beautiful, smart, but ultimately narcissistic, much like my father was. I did a lot of self-reflection and re-entered the dating scene prematurely, but I'm in my 60s, and I wanted to have an experience with a woman that was not haunted by the last one. Catherine was someone I'd known peripherally for years, a friend of a friend from the old couple's dinner days. Ivy League education, played cello, had her own betrayal story that she carried with the quiet dignity of someone who'd done the work and didn't need to perform having done the work. We reconnected at a mutual friend's birthday party. She asked me how I was doing, and I said better, and she nodded like she knew exactly what that word cost. We've been together for years now. We have never had a fight. Not because we avoid conflict, because she doesn't weaponize intimacy. She disagrees with me the way an adult disagrees with another adult. The first time she said, "I think you're wrong about that," without any edge, without any cruelty, without storing it for later use. I almost cried at the dinner table. Ellie graduated from a competitive college in New York City. She rebuilt her relationship with me slowly, brick by brick, and one evening over dinner she said, "I respect that you never badmouthed Mom. My throat closed." I just nodded. 7 years after D-Day, Denise showed up at my house to pick up old family videotapes. She stood on the porch looking nervous, heavier, older, in a way that had nothing to do with age. She said she was sorry. She said she went crazy and ruined everything. She said she understood if I hated her, I didn't hate her. That's what surprised me. I searched for the anger the way you pat your pockets for your keys, and it simply wasn't there. I nodded. I gave her the tapes. I wished her well, and I meant it. Catherine and I married in our front yard. My 3 grandsons were the flower boys. The 2 oldest scattered petals with enormous seriousness. The youngest, 2 years old, faced like a biscuit, wandered off halfway down the aisle to play with Grandpa's woodworking scraps piled by the garage. Everyone laughed. Catherine squeezed my hand. I used to think the goal was forgiveness. It isn't. The goal is the ability to trust again. Not the same person. Not the same way. But to stand in front of someone and say, "Times here is every soft thing about me times," and actually believe in your bones that they won't use it to destroy you, that's the whole thing. That's everything.
The text message lit up my phone with the sterile glow of a bomb's countdown timer. Asterisk, Mom, Paul, we need to talk. Family meeting. Call me. Asterisk. I stared at it, a greasy wrench in my hand. My knuckles were bleeding again from fighting with the garbage disposal under my new kitchen sink. Asterisk. My Times sink. In Times, my Times house. A house I bought 6 months ago after 3 years of sleeping in my car on couches, and one particularly brutal winter in a shelter. The last time I'd had a family meeting, my key no longer worked in the front door of their house, and my belongings were sitting in a trash bag on the porch. I was 18. I wiped my hands on a rag, tossed the wrench into the sink with a clang, and dialed. "Paul, honey, I'm so glad you called." My mother's voice was syrupy sweet, a tone she only used when she was about to ask for something big. "What do you want, Mom? No preamble." "No, how are you?" We didn't have that kind of relationship. Can't a mother just want to see her son? We haven't seen your new house yet. We're so proud of you. You know where I live. You've never come by. A sigh, heavy and practiced. The sound of a martyr mounting her cross. "Well, your father and I and Dan, we thought we could all go out to dinner. Our treat. Just to catch up. Dan? Of course. The golden child. The reason for every emergency, every faked crisis, every dollar they ever had. I'm busy," I said. "Paul, please. It's important." The sweetness in her voice curdled into a whine. "Dan's having a hard time." I almost laughed. When is Dan not having a hard time? That's not fair. His wife, Sarah, she's just very difficult. She makes life impossible for him, for all of us. He can't get ahead. I leaned against my own kitchen counter, the cool granite, a solid reminder of everything I'd built without them. And this requires a family meeting with me. We just need to talk. As a family. Please. For me. The old guilt, a familiar phantom, pricked at my conscience. I hated it. I hated them for installing it. And I hated myself for letting it still have any power. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "The steakhouse on Market Street. Tomorrow. 7 o'clock. If you're a minute late, I'm leaving." "Oh, thank you, baby. You won't regret this." I hung up. I knew I already did. The next night I walked into the restaurant at 7 on the dot. They were already there, huddled in a corner booth like refugees. My father, looking older and smaller than I remembered, fiddled with a sugar packet. My mother gave me a watery smile. And Dan looked like a cornered animal. His expensive clothes were rumpled, his face was puffy, and he vibrated with a nervous energy that made my teeth ache. "Paul, you made it," my mother chirped, a little too loud. I slid into the booth opposite them. The silence was thick enough to chew. A waitress came and took our drink orders. I ordered a whiskey neat. They all ordered water. So my father cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative. It didn't work anymore. "Your mother tells me you're doing well. The house is good." "It's fine," I said. "Must be nice," Dan muttered, staring daggers at the breadbasket. "Having so much space, so much quiet." My mother put a placating hand on his arm. "Now, Danny." Paul worked hard. She turned her plastic smile on me. "We know you did. It's just, well, things have been tough. Sarah is spending every penny Dan makes. He can't save a thing. She's threatening to leave him if he doesn't buy her a bigger house, one like yours." "That's a Dan problem," I said, taking a sip of my whiskey. The burn was clarifying. "It's a family problem," she insisted. "He's living in our basement again, and frankly, she's making our lives a living hell. We can't take it anymore." I looked at my brother, the golden boy who could do no wrong. The one who got a new car for his 16th birthday while I was told to get a job to pay for my own bus pass. The one whose college tuition was paid in full while I was told community college was a waste of money. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just glared at the table, radiating pure, uncut entitlement. "So, what does this have to do with me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. My father leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. The old bully was trying to surface. This was it. The pitch. He dropped the folksy concerned dad act and got straight to the point. "Your brother's credit is shot. Completely worthless. He can't get a loan, can't even get approved to rent a decent apartment. Sarah is going to walk and take the kids if he doesn't get them out of our basement." He paused, letting the manufactured drama hang in the air. I just stared at him, my face a blank mask. I refused to give him anything. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto mine. "We need you to help your brother. We need you to fix this." "Fix this," I let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. It was a sound like breaking glass. "You're asking me to fix it?" My mother jumped in her voice, trembling with manufactured urgency. "Paul, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. We just need a little help to get them on their feet. We thought maybe you could give Dan the down payment for a small house. 20, maybe 30,000, or if that's too much, you could just co-sign on an apartment lease for him. Just for a year, to give him a chance." There it was. The payload. The reason for the free steak dinner they were never going to pay for. They wanted me to either hand over a life-altering sum of money I didn't have, or legally chain myself to my brother's inevitable financial implosion. I looked from my mother's pleading face to my father's stony glare. Then I looked at Dan, who was staring at me with the raw, desperate hunger of a wolf. No, I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. Dan's face contorted, twisting from desperation into pure, unadulterated rage. No, what the hell do you mean? Times, no times, he hissed, his voice rising with every word. He slammed his fist on the table, making the water glasses jump. Look at you, sitting there in your fancy shirt, drinking your expensive whiskey. You have a whole house all to yourself. We're drowning and you won't even throw us a damn life raft. I have a family, I have kids. What do you have? Nothing. You owe us. You owe times me, asterisk. The outburst was everything I expected. The classic Dan tantrum. But instead of the anger he wanted the fight he was trying to start, I felt a strange and sudden calm. The old hooks of guilt and obligation had nothing to purchase on. They just slid right off. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, set the glass down with a deliberate click, and leaned forward, my voice low and even. Owe you. Let's talk about what I owe you. I looked directly at my parents. Remember when I called you from a payphone after my car broke down? It was January. I was 18 and sleeping in that Civic. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I asked if I could just come home for one night just to get warm. And you, I nodded, at my father told me that I'd made my bed and it was time to grow up and lie in it. Then you hung up. My father's face went pale. My mother started to sniffle. My house. I continued, my gaze shifting to Dan. The mortgage is $2,132 a month. My truck payment, the one I need for work, is $500 to $160. Add in insurance, utilities, property, taxes, and food. And after a 60-hour work week, I have about $300 left over. That's it. That's my so much. I'm not rich, Dan. I'm one blown transmission away from being right back in that Walmart parking lot. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The cold, hard numbers were louder than his shouting ever could be. You're a senior project manager at a tech firm. I saw your promotion on LinkedIn. You clear what, $120,000 a year? I'm a mechanic. I make 65 on a good year. You earn almost double what I do. So don't you dare sit there and tell me I have so much when you and your wife piss away a fortune on crap you can't afford. I let that sink in. The silence in the booth was absolute. The background chatter of the restaurant seemed a million miles away. Then I delivered the final blow. I looked at my parents, who were now staring at their hands in their laps, utterly defeated. But here's the most telling part of this whole pathetic little play. You too, I said, my voice softening just enough to make the words cut deeper. You won't even co-sign for him. You know he's a black hole. You know he'll default and ruin your credit, maybe even risk your own home. You want me to light myself on fire to keep your precious golden child warm, but you won't even risk getting your own fingers burnt. Dan just stared at me, his mouth hanging open. The rage was gone, replaced by a hollow, slack-jawed shock. He had no response. There wasn't one. I had taken his narrative, his lifetime of entitlement, and methodically dismantled it with the truth. He shoved back from the table, his chair screeching against the floor. I hate you, he spat the words, lacking any real venom. They were just the last gasp of a spoiled child. He turned and stormed out of the restaurant, slamming the door behind him. My mother began to sob quietly into her napkin. My father, the man who had once been my biggest bully, just looked old. Small. Beaten. I flagged down the waitress. "They'll have the filet mignon medium rare," I said, nodding to my parents. "And whatever else they want. A bottle of wine, dessert, the works. It's on me." I slid a $100 bill onto the table. "For a tip?" I stood up and put on my jacket. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, not looking at them. "It's the last thing you'll ever get from me." I walked out of that restaurant and didn't look back. The air outside was cool and clean. I felt light. The next day, the attack came just as I knew it would. Not from them, but from Sarah's army. A cousin I'd never met sent me a scathing Facebook message about being a heartless monster. An old family friend commented on a 2-year-old photo on my Instagram, calling me selfish. The flying monkeys had been released. 10 years ago, it would have destroyed me. 5 years ago, it would have sent me into a spiral of rage and anxiety. I sat on the porch of my Times house, a cold beer in my hand, and looked at the message from the unknown cousin. I tapped the screen. Asterisk, block user, asterisk. A notification popped up for the Instagram comment. I tapped again. Asterisk. Block user. Asterisk. With each press of a button, I felt another invisible chain breaking. They had no power here. Their words were just ghosts rattling at windows they could no longer break. The war was over. I had finally won. Look, all I wanted was one day. One perfect drama-free day where my fiancé Mark and I could get married, have a nice dinner, and then dance with our friends until our feet hurt. We weren't asking for much. A small venue, 100 of our closest people, and one simple rule: the reception was for adults only. It wasn't even a hard and fast, no kids allowed rule. We love our friends' kids. We love our nieces and nephews. So we made a clear distinction. Ceremony. Kids are welcome. Dinner? Absolutely. We'll even have high chairs and a kids' menu. But from 8 p.m. onward, when the open bar really got flowing and the music got loud, we wanted an adult party. To make it easy, we even booked a suite at the venue and hired 2 licensed background check childcare providers. We were setting up a kids-only paradise with movies, video games, pizza, and sleeping bags. We were literally paying for a party for them so the parents could have a party with us. Reasonable, right? Apparently not for Lisa, Mark's older sister. The phone call started well enough. Mark put her on speakerphone. "Hey Liz, just wanted to give you a heads up on the final wedding details before the official invites go out." "Ooh, exciting. Is Aubrey's flower girl dress finalized?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "Yep, Pam's sister is handling it." "It's gorgeous," Mark said. "So one thing we wanted to let everyone with kids know is that the reception after dinner will be adults only, but we've arranged for on-site childcare for all the little ones." Silence. Just dead crackling air on the line. I shot Mark a look. He cleared his throat. "Liz? You there? You're kicking my daughter out of your wedding." Her voice was dangerously quiet. "Of course not," I jumped in, trying to keep my tone light. Aubrey is going to be the star of the show at the ceremony and dinner. We just figured the reception would be more fun for the grown-ups, and the kids would have a blast in their own space. My daughter doesn't go with Time's strangers. Time's Lisa, said the words, clipped and cold. She is the flower girl. She is family. She stays with me. Mark took over. Liz, it's not up for debate. This is the rule for everyone. We're not making exceptions. We'll see about that, she muttered, and the line went dead. I looked at Mark, my stomach twisting into a knot. That went well. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Just ignore it. She'll have her little pout, and then she'll get over it. She always does. But she didn't get over it. She escalated. The next day, my phone rang. It was my mom. My mom, who has a heart condition and is supposed to be avoiding stress at all costs. Pamela, honey, I just had the most distressing call. I knew instantly. It was Lisa, wasn't it? Yes, she was crying, Pamela. Sobbing. She said you're banning her poor daughter from the wedding and breaking her little heart. She said Mark is just going along with whatever his demanding fiancé wants. She made it sound like you were some kind of monster. My blood ran cold, then hot. Mom, that is not what is happening. We have childcare. We have a kids' party planned. Lisa is lying to you to get her way. Well, it's just one little girl, dear, my mom said, her voice wavering. Is it really worth upsetting the whole family over? That was Lisa's weapon. She knew our mothers were our weak spots. Mark's mom, Carol, was a sweetheart, but she'd been steamrolled by Lisa her entire life and was recovering from a nasty bout of pneumonia. Lisa knew Carol hated conflict more than anything. An hour later, Mark's phone buzzed. It was his mother. He stepped onto the balcony, but I could hear his voice getting tighter and tighter through the glass. Mom, we've already been over this. No, Pam is not being a bridezilla. It's a mutual decision. Because it's our wedding, that's why. Mom, she is a grown woman throwing a tantrum. Please don't ask me to give in to this. He came back inside and slammed the sliding door shut, his jaw clenched. She's now telling Mom that if Aubrey can't be at the reception, then none of them will come. She said, I'm choosing you over my real family. She's poisoning them against me, I whispered, feeling sick. She's deliberately going to our sick mothers to emotionally blackmail us. It's what she does, Mark said, his face grim. She finds the weakest point and presses until it breaks. For the next week, it was a coordinated campaign of guilt. Lisa would call our mothers in the morning, spinning a new tale of woe about her victimized daughter. Then by the afternoon, our mothers would call us, their voices full of anxiety, begging us to just give in and keep the peace. They didn't understand. Giving in wouldn't keep the peace. It would just teach Lisa that her bullying worked. It would tell her that our boundaries meant nothing, that our wedding day was just another event for her to control. The final straw came on Friday. A text from Mark's mom. Asterisk. Lisa has been calling all day. I can't take this stress anymore. We need to sort this out face to face. I'm hosting a family lunch on Sunday. You, Pam, me, your father, and Lisa. We are not leaving until this is resolved. Asterisk. I read the message over Mark's shoulder, a cold dread washing over me. This wasn't a lunch. It was an ambush. A trap designed to corner us with our exhausted mothers as the emotional shields. Mark typed back a simple asterisk. "We'll be there." Asterisk. He looked at me, his eyes dark with frustration. "We're walking into the lion's den." "I know," I said, taking a deep breath. "And I have a feeling the lioness is waiting right by the door." The air in Carol's house was so thick you could have sliced it with a roast beef knife. Mark's father mumbled about the weather. Carol fluttered around, refilling water glasses that were already full. Mark and I sat like statues. "And Lisa?" Lisa was playing the martyr, sighing dramatically every time she looked at me. We made it through the main course with gritted teeth and small talk. As Carol started clearing plates, I stood to help. "I'll get these, Carol." It was the opening Lisa had been waiting for. She followed me into the kitchen, shutting the door halfway behind us. "I'm glad we have a moment," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I think there's been a huge misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Lisa," I said, stacking plates with more force than necessary. "The rule is for everyone." "But don't you see, you're tearing this family apart. Mom is sick with worry. You're putting Mark in an impossible position. All because you want to have a dance party." Her voice rose, cracking with practiced emotion. "My daughter looks up to you. And you're telling her she's not good enough to be at your celebration." Something inside me stretched taut for weeks finally snapped. I slammed the plates down on the counter. "Don't you dare put this on your daughter. Or on me. This is about you. You've never been told no in your life. And you can't handle it." Her jaw dropped. "How dare you?" "No, how dare times you. Times I." Shot back my voice, low and shaking with rage. "How dare you call my sick mother and yours crying and lying to manipulate them into fighting your battles? You are a 40-year-old woman throwing a grown-up tantrum. Aubrey, your 8-year-old daughter is more mature than you are. The actual children are better behaved than you. So for once in your life, grow the hell up." Silence. Her face was a mask of shock and fury. Before she could unload, Mark pushed the door open, his face grim. "We're leaving." The drive home was silent. Later that night, as expected, Carol called. Her voice was weak. "Pamela, dear, please. Just give in. For me, for the sake of the family, just let her have this one thing." I felt the last of my resolve crumbling. I looked at Mark, defeated. Before I could answer, a notification lit up my phone. My older sister, Sarah. She'd flown in a week early. Asterisk. On my way. Picked up wine and battle plans. Don't you dare surrender. Asterisk. Sarah's arrival was like a SEAL team extraction. She took my phone, blocked Lisa's number, and took over all communication with both our mothers. When Lisa tried to ambush me at my final dress fitting, Sarah met her in the parking lot. I didn't hear what was said, but Lisa drove away looking pale. Sarah became my gatekeeper, my press secretary, and my personal guard dog. The morning of the wedding, Sarah, Mark, and I stood with Lisa in the hotel lobby. "Let's be crystal clear," Sarah said, her voice calm and utterly immovable. "Aubrey is welcome at the ceremony and the dinner. The moment the reception begins at 8 p.m., she goes to the child care suite with the other kids. If you try to bring her into the ballroom, you will be asked to leave. If you refuse, you will be times made, times to leave. There are no more warnings." Lisa just smiled a tight, knowing smile. I would never dream of causing a scene. The ceremony was beautiful. The dinner was delicious. Aubrey was a perfect flower girl. At 7:55 p.m., the DJ announced that the reception was beginning in the main ballroom and that childcare was now open in the Rose Suite. I saw Lisa whisper something to Aubrey, take her hand and walk, purposefully, not towards the suite, but towards the grand entrance of the ballroom. She thought she'd won. She thought we'd be too busy or too flustered to notice. She didn't count on my family. As she reached the ballroom doors, a wall of people formed in front of her. Sarah stood in the center, flanked by my 6 brothers and sisters, all of them dressed to the nines and wearing identical, unyielding expressions. They didn't say a word. They just stood there, a silent, smiling barricade. Lisa stopped short. Her smile faltered. "Excuse me," she said, trying to push past my brother Tom. He didn't budge. Sarah stepped forward. "Lisa, you have 2 choices, your final 2 choices of the evening." She pointed down the hall. Option 1, you walk Aubrey to the Rose Suite right now where she can have pizza and play with her cousins. Then you can come back and enjoy the party. She then gestured toward the hotel's main exit. Option 2, you both leave right now. No goodbyes, no scene. Just go. Lisa's face went white, then red, then a blotchy combination of the two. She looked around, realizing several guests were now watching the silent standoff. She looked at the human wall in front of her. She looked at the exit. The public humiliation of being thrown out was clearly more than she was willing to risk. Defeated, she let out a clipped sigh. Fine. She grabbed Aubrey's hand and practically dragged her down the hall. We watched as she opened the door to the Rose Suite. Aubrey's face lit up. She saw her cousins, a giant TV, playing a movie, and a table loaded with treats. She dropped Lisa's hand and ran inside without a backward glance. She was exactly where she wanted to be. The door clicked shut, leaving Lisa standing alone in the hallway. She spent the rest of the reception sitting at a corner table, nursing a single glass of wine and radiating misery. Anyone who approached her was met with a one-word answer or a toxic glare. She left without saying goodbye. The next day, the passive-aggressive Facebook posts began. Vague statuses about family who forgets what's important, and some people's priorities are just sad. They were met with a resounding silence. No likes. No comments. Everyone had seen her behavior, and no one was falling for the victim act. Meanwhile, Mark and I had the night of our lives. We danced, we laughed until we cried. We were surrounded by people who loved and respected us. Standing there with my new husband's arms around me, I looked across the dance floor at all our friends and family celebrating. It was perfect. It was drama-free. And it was worth every single battle we had to fight to protect it. For 16 years, I wasn't married to just one person. I was married to a man-child and his mother. Mark was her golden boy, the sun her entire universe orbited around, and I was just some inconvenient moon that kept getting in her light. His drinking started as a weekend thing. A few beers with friends. Then it was a few beers every night. Then it was a bottle of whiskey before breakfast. I'd find him passed out in his car in our own driveway, the engine still running. He wrapped our sedan around a telephone pole one night, got a DUI, and called his mommy from the police station before he ever thought to call me. It was the rain, Zoe, his mother Eleanor had said, her voice a sharp, polished weapon. The roads were slick. It could have happened to anyone. It couldn't have happened to anyone. It happened to a drunk. When our daughter Lily was 7, he took her to the park and left her there. Just forgot her. I found her 3 hours later huddled on a bench, crying after a frantic search that nearly stopped my heart. When I screamed at him, his eyes were glassy, his breath reeked of gin. He just shrugged. She knows the way home. That's when CPS got involved. A neighbor had called. The social worker was a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Gable. She sat on our sofa taking notes, while Eleanor sat beside me, one perfectly manicured hand patting my knee in a gesture that was supposed to look like support but felt like a threat. Mark is under a lot of pressure at work, Eleanor explained, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. And Zoe, well, she gets overwhelmed. She's a worrier. Mark just sat there sober for once, nodding like a puppet while his mother pulled the strings. The case was eventually closed with a warning and a mandatory parenting class he never finished. But the worst part was the stories Lily would tell me after her court-ordered weekends with him and Eleanor. She'd crawl into my lap, her small voice a whisper. "Mommy, Grandma says you're sick in the head." I'd hold her tight, my own heart, a cold knot in my chest. "Grandma doesn't know what she's talking about, sweetie." Another time she came home pale and quiet. It took me an hour of coaxing before she finally spoke. Daddy and Grandma were talking in the kitchen. They said they were going to take me on a big trip soon. A secret one. And that we wouldn't have to come back to you anymore. I called my lawyer. He said it was hearsay. A child's fantasy. There was nothing he could do without proof. I felt like I was screaming into a void. I told the police. They told me it was a family matter. Every weekend visit was torture. I'd watch the clock, my stomach in knots, until her little face reappeared at the door. I felt like I was handing my daughter over to wolves, and the law was forcing me to do it. Then the world tilted sideways. I was on a stepladder in the kitchen, changing a burnt-out bulb. I don't know if I slipped, or if the ladder just gave way. 1 second I was reaching for the ceiling, the next I was on the linoleum, a searing white-hot pain shooting up from my ankle. My leg was bent at an angle that wasn't human. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed, my leg encased in a massive cast, and suspended in the air. The doctor said it was a compound fracture of the tibia and fibula. I needed surgery. I'd be off my feet for months. Mark and Eleanor showed up within the hour. Eleanor's face was a mask of grave concern. "Oh, you poor, poor thing," she cooed her hand, cool on my forehead. So clumsy. She glanced at the cast, a flicker of something that wasn't sympathy in her eyes. It looked like victory. "What about Lily?" I asked, my voice thick from the morphine. "Don't you worry about a thing," Mark said, avoiding my eyes. "Mom and I will handle it. We already called Mrs. Gable at CPS. Since you're incapacitated, the temporary supervisory order defaults to Grandma." A cold dread more potent than any painkiller washed over me. He said it so casually. They had a plan. This wasn't a tragedy to them. It was an opportunity. "No," I mumbled, trying to sit up, but the pain slammed me back down. "No, she stays with my sister." "Carol lives 2 hours away," Zoe Eleanor said smoothly. "That's not practical for school. We're 5 minutes away. It's what's best for Lily." CPS agrees. They left with a flurry of promises to bring Lily by the next day. They never did. For the first week, the excuses were plausible. Lily had a cold. She had a big project for school. She was tired. Mark's texts were short, dismissive. I was trapped in that hospital bed, my leg in traction, my mind racing. I called my sister frantic. She drove to their house, but no one answered. The windows were dark. On day 8, my calls to Mark started going straight to voicemail. I called Eleanor's phone over and over until finally she picked up. Her voice was bright, airy, like she was calling from a resort. "Zoe, how are you feeling, dear?" "Where's my daughter Eleanor?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Oh, she's right here. Having the time of her life. We thought she could use a little vacation, get her mind off her poor mother's accident." Behind her I could hear the faint sound of seagulls and crashing waves. They weren't at home, they weren't in the city. "A vacation, where are you?" I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. A nurse glanced in her brow, furrowed at the frantic beeping of my heart monitor. There was a pause on the line, and I could practically hear Eleanor's malicious smile. "Don't you worry your pretty little head," she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "We just crossed the state line. Lily sends her love." The line went dead. For a moment I just stared at the phone in my hand, the distant sound of seagulls from Eleanor's end still echoing in my ear. The heart monitor beside my bed screamed a high, panicked rhythm that matched my own. A nurse rushed in. "Ma'am, are you all right? Your blood pressure is through the roof." "Get my lawyer," I gasped, clutching the plastic railing of the hospital bed. "And my sister. Now." The next month was a blur of painkillers, physical therapy, and a legal battle waged from a hospital bed. I spent every waking second on the phone, my voice raw from pleading with police departments in 2 states, a private investigator my sister Carol hired, and my exhausted lawyer. They'd used my accident, my physical incapacitation, as a weapon. They'd lied to the CPS supervisor, telling Mrs. Gable they were taking Lily to a family cabin upstate for some fresh air while I recovered. Instead, they'd driven 600 miles south to a beach rental under a fake name. I testified via a shaky video call from my hospital room, my leg propped up on a tower of pillows, looking a judge in the eye as I recounted 16 years of hell. The private investigator presented their rental agreements, photos of Lily on a Florida beach, posted to a secret social media account. Eleanor ran and phone records, proving their premeditated flight. The judge didn't mince words. He called their actions monstrous and a depraved abuse of trust. He issued an emergency order. They were forced to return Lily immediately. I was granted sole legal and physical custody and a 5-year family violence order against both Mark and Eleanor. The day Lily came home, I was waiting in a wheelchair on the front porch, my sister beside me. Lily scrambled out of the police car and ran into my arms, sobbing. She was thinner, tanner, and her eyes held a shadow that hadn't been there before. "Grandma said you didn't want me anymore," she whispered into my shoulder. "She said you gave me to her." Over my daughter's shaking shoulders, I watched Eleanor stand beside her lawyer, her expression not one of remorse, but of cold, reptilian fury. This wasn't over. This was an intermission. The FVO was just a piece of paper, and I knew it. The first thing I did was drive to Lily's school, my legs still in a walking cast, and meet with the principal. I gave her copies of the court order photos of Mark and Eleanor and explicit instructions no one but me or my sister Carol could ever pick Lily up. No exceptions. The principal, a stern woman with kind eyes, assured me they understood. A week later, my phone buzzed during a meeting. It was the school. "Mrs. Daniels, it's Principal Evans. Eleanor is here. She's demanding to take Lily for a dentist appointment she claims you forgot." My blood ran cold. "I'll be there in 5 minutes. Do not let her see Lily." I broke every speed limit getting there. I hobbled through the front doors to find Eleanor at the reception desk, arguing with the principal. She had a fake appointment card in her hand, her face a mask of sweet reason. "There must be a misunderstanding," Eleanor was saying, her voice oozing charm. "Poor Zoe has been so forgetful since her accident. It's on her calendar. I'm just trying to help." "There's no misunderstanding, Eleanor," I said, my voice hard as stone. She whirled around the smile, freezing on her face. "Zoe, I was just telling the lovely Principal Evans here." "I know what you were telling her. And you can tell the rest of your lies to the police." I pulled out my phone. "You are in direct violation of a court order. Get away from my daughter's school before I have you arrested for contempt." Her mask shattered. For the first time I saw the pure, undiluted venom she'd always hidden. Her eyes narrowed. "You will not keep my grandchild from me." "She's times, my times, daughter," I shot back. "And you are nothing to her. Leave." She stared at me for a long, hateful moment before turning on her heel and stalking out. The victory felt hollow. It was just a test, a probe of my defenses. The real proof, the kind I'd needed for years, came 2 weeks later. Mark had to drop off a box of Lily's things from his old room, a requirement of the custody order. He was late flustered. He practically threw the box at my door and sped off. It wasn't until later that I saw it slip down between a stack of books and a stuffed unicorn, his old phone. He must have dropped it in his haste. I almost threw it away. But some instinct made me plug it in. It took me an hour to guess his pathetic password, Lily's birthday. And then I saw it all. Years of it. Texts between him and Eleanor. Asterisk Eleanor, did you tell the CPS worker? Zoe has been drinking again, plant the seed. Asterisk. Asterisk. Mark. Mom, she doesn't drink. Asterisk. Asterisk. Eleanor. It doesn't matter if it's true, Mark. It only matters if they believe it. Asterisk. Asterisk. Eleanor. The lawyer said we need more documentation of her instability. Did you record her when she was yelling at you about forgetting Lily at the park? Asterisk. Asterisk. Mark, I tried. She just sounded like a pissed-off mom. Asterisk. Asterisk. Eleanor useless. I'll handle it. Asterisk. There were messages to his friends, his cousins, all painting me as a hysterical, unstable shrew. A long, orchestrated smear campaign designed to strip me of my credibility and my daughter. Reading it felt like swallowing glass, but it was also a strange, validating relief. I wasn't crazy. It was all real. The final straw came a month after the school incident. Mark called me. His tone was breezy, casual, as if nothing had happened. "Hey, Zoe. So Mom and I are planning a trip to Europe in the summer. We'd love to take Lily, see the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum. It'll be a great experience for her." I was silent, stunned by the sheer breathtaking audacity. "I know what the FVO says," he continued quickly, "but our lawyer said we can just file a motion to amend the order for the trip. A temporary change. It's no big deal." "No big deal." My voice was dangerously quiet. "You tried to kidnap my daughter. Your mother tried to take her from school last month. And you want me to let you take her to another continent? Are you insane?" He sighed, a long-suffering sound he'd perfected over the years. "Look, can you just try not to be so dramatic? I have your old phone, Mark." The silence on the other end was absolute. "I have the texts," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "All of them. The ones where you and your mother plot how to plant the seed with CPS. The ones where she tells you to record me. The smear campaign. I have all of it." He didn't deny it. He just let out a weak, pathetic laugh. "You were never good enough for us, Zoe. We never liked you. You were just the incubator." The word hung in the air, ugly and cold. "Mom deserves to have Lily," he said, his voice finally gaining some conviction. "She can give her a better life. She has the money. She has the means. We're her family. What are you? Nothing." That was it. The truth stripped of all pretense. It wasn't about my fitness as a mother. It was about power. About wealth. About an obsessive woman who believed she had the right to purchase my child like she'd purchase a yacht. I hung up. I now have sole custody. I have a restraining order. I have a phone full of evidence that would bury them in any court. But I don't feel safe. I feel like a survivor of a botched assassination attempt who knows the hitman is still out there. They failed once clumsily. They won't be clumsy next time. Every time a car I don't recognize parks on our street, my heart seizes. Every time Lily is 5 minutes late coming home, I start to panic. I won the battle, but they left me with a life sentence of fear, forever waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I know with a certainty that chills me to the bone that it will. The first year with Anna was easy. It was all brewery dates and stupid inside jokes and the kind of sex that makes you late for work. We were that couple. The one our friends secretly hated. We just fit. When she suggested we buy a house together, it felt like the most natural next step in the world. My credit was shot from a business I'd tried to start in my 20s, so the mortgage had to be in her name. "It's just a technicality, baby," she'd said, signing the papers with a flourish. "It's our Times house." The first box was barely unpacked when the cracks started to show. It started small. I'd left a cabinet door open. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped, slamming it shut so hard the frame rattled. "Were you raised in a barn?" I stared at her. "Anna, what the hell? It's a cabinet!" Her face twisted. "It's not just a cabinet, it's about respect. You have no respect for our things. For times, me asterisk." The argument spiraled. My voice got louder to match hers. Then came the words that would become her favorite weapon. "You know what? If you don't like it, you can get the fuck out of my house." The air went out of my lungs. Asterisk. My Times house. The words hung between us ugly and absolute. I slept on the couch that night. The next morning she was waiting for me in the kitchen with coffee tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Lucas," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. "I don't know why I said that. I was just so stressed. It's our house. I'll never say that again." She said it again 2 weeks later when I forgot to take out the recycling. And a month after that, when I was 5 minutes late coming home from work. Each fight got a little hotter. She shattered a coffee mug against the backsplash once. Another time she threw a picture frame, one of us smiling on vacation, so hard it splintered on the floor. And every single time the next morning brought the same apologies. The same promises. I started to live for the mornings, for that brief period of peace where the woman I fell in love with came back. I convinced myself the yelling and the breaking things was just the stress of the new mortgage. A phase. So when she brought up getting married, I thought times, yes, this will fix it. This will make us permanent. This will make it our home for real. Asterisk. I was a fool. The ring on her finger didn't change a thing. The fights got worse. The threats to kick me out became more frequent. I finally dragged her to couples counseling. We went 3 times. The third time, the therapist suggested Anna had trouble regulating her emotions. In the car on the way home, Anna was silent. Finally, she turned to me, her jaw set. "We're not going back," she said. "It wasn't a discussion." Why not? She was trying to help. She's an idiot who doesn't know me. I'm not paying some woman $150 an hour to tell me I'm crazy. We're done with her. And we were. A week later, she sat me down on the couch, the same couch I'd slept on so many times before. She wouldn't look at me. "Lucas," she started, her voice unnervingly calm. "I love you. I just don't times like times you anymore." The words were a clean, cold slice. "What does that even mean, Anna?" "It means I can't do this. We have to call off the wedding." She finally looked up, and there wasn't a trace of sadness in her eyes. Just a flat, hard resolution. I felt the floor drop out from under me. All the fights, the apologies, the walking on eggshells, I had endured it all because I thought we were building a life, a future. Now she was tearing it down with a single sentence. "So that's it, you're just giving up." "I'm not giving up," she said, her voice rising. Asterisk. You times gave up, you stopped trying, you made me this way. We lived like ghosts for the next month. The wedding was canceled, deposits were lost. We slept in the same bed but didn't touch. We existed in a thick, suffocating silence, punctuated only by her bitter sighs whenever I entered a room. I was numb, just trying to figure out how to untangle a life that was legally entirely hers. The breaking point didn't come from a fight. It came from a notification. Her phone was on the nightstand, face up. She was in the shower. It lit up with a text message. Asterisk. Asterisk. Mark. Work. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Asterisk. Asterisk. I read it once. Twice. A cold fire spread through my chest. Mark. The coworker she'd been staying late with, the one she swore was just a friend. All the late nights, the team dinners, the sudden obsession with her phone, it all snapped into focus. I didn't say anything. I waited until she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, humming. I just held up the phone. Her face went from confusion to panic to a cold, hard defiance in the space of 3 seconds. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. She snatched the phone from my hand. You went through my phone. What is wrong with you? You cheated on me, Anna. She laughed. A short, ugly sound. Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. I told you I didn't love you anymore. What did you expect was going to happen? She blamed me. She cheated and she was blaming me. That was it. The last thread holding me together snapped. The love, the hope, the memory of that first easy year, it all curdled into pure, undiluted rage. She stood there so smug, so certain of her power over me in the house that was in her name with the life she was systematically dismantling. But she'd forgotten one thing. Mark. Mark had a life too. I remembered her mentioning it once, laughing about how clueless his wife was. Sarah, I think her name was. I walked out of the bedroom, my hands shaking. I grabbed my laptop, sat down at the kitchen island, and typed Mark Reynolds and his company name into Facebook. There he was. Profile picture of him and a smiling blonde woman. His wife, Sarah. Her profile was public. Photos of their 2 little kids beamed from the screen. A perfect family. My heart hammered against my ribs. Anna had torched my life and felt nothing. She thought she could just walk away clean. I clicked on Sarah Reynolds' profile. The message button seemed to glow on the screen. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the mouse. My finger clicked. The message was sent. I attached a screenshot of the text from Mark's phone. No commentary, just the evidence. I closed the laptop. The silence in the house was absolute, a vacuum waiting for the coming storm. That night I didn't sleep on the couch. I went out. I went to a bar I hadn't been to in years, a dive with sticky floors and cheap whiskey. I got drunk. Not buzzed, not happy drunk, but obliteration drunk. I met a woman whose name I think was Jessica. We went back to her apartment. The whole thing was mechanical, a desperate and pathetic attempt to prove something to myself. I left before the sun was up, the taste of regret thick and metallic in my mouth. It hadn't made me feel powerful. It had made me feel cheap. It was a hollow, pointless act, and the only person I'd managed to hurt was myself. I was nursing a hangover in a pot of black coffee when Anna got home the next day. The front door slammed open so hard it hit the wall, leaving a fresh dent in the drywall. Her face was a mask of pure fury. She threw her purse at me. I ducked and it hit the cabinets with a heavy thud. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't you lie to me, Lucas. Don't you dare," Sarah Reynolds called the office. She called HR. She called Mark's boss. She sent them everything. I just looked at her, my coffee cup steady in my hands. And they suspended him pending an investigation. I had to sit there while my boss looked at me like I was some piece of trash. So I quit. I told them all to go to hell. She was pacing now, a caged animal. This is all your fault. You couldn't just leave it alone. You had to destroy everything. Asterisk. I times destroyed everything. I laughed a bitter, broken sound. Anna, you were sleeping with him. You threw away our engagement. You did this. I did it because of you, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You suffocated me. You made me miserable, and now you've ruined my career, my life. I just shook my head and took another sip of coffee. I was empty. Her rage couldn't even touch me. The next few weeks were a new kind of hell. She stayed in the guest room. We didn't speak. Then one day I came home and she was sitting at the kitchen island, a grim smile on her face. I hope you're happy, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I'm never going to be happy again, Anna. What is it now? I reported Mark to the IRS. For tax fraud. He's been skimming from freelance projects for years, bragging about it to me. She took a sip of wine. His life is over. His wife took the kids, and now the government is going to take the rest. He deserves it. I stared at her, horrified. Why would you do that? For revenge, she said, looking right at me. Something you should understand. The letter came a month later. It was from a law firm. Anna was being sued. Mark was claiming she was an active participant in the fraud, that her report was malicious retaliation after he broke off their affair. He was suing her for defamation, conspiracy, and emotional distress. The number on the paper made me feel sick. $500, 000. She slid it across the island to me. Look, she whispered, her voice finally breaking. Look what you've done. You ruined my life, my job, any chance we ever had of even being friends. I hope you're satisfied. She refused any more counseling. She refused to speak to me unless it was to blame me for the lawsuit for her unemployment for the goddamn weather. We lived in that house together for 2 more agonizing months, 2 ghosts haunting the memory of a life we'd once planned. The air was thick with hatred. Finally, my name was taken off the non-existent lease. I packed my things into cardboard boxes and I left the house that had never been mine. 6 months passed in a blur of cheap apartments and meaningless work. The lawyers handled everything. I didn't see her again until we met in a sterile conference room to sign the final papers. She was thinner. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out sadness. She sat across from me, fiddling with the pen. Hey, she said softly. Anna. Our lawyers did the talking. We just sat there, the silence between us heavier than ever. My lawyer slid the papers in front of me. I uncapped my pen, my hand ready. This was it. The final cut. Lucas, wait, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I looked up. There were tears welling in her eyes. the same tears I'd seen 100 times after 100 fights. She started shaking her head. Seeing you here, it just feels so final. So wrong. My heart stuttered. The lawyer cleared his throat, but I didn't look away from her. Sometimes I think, she continued, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, that maybe we just gave up too easily. Maybe if we had fought harder, I don't know. I just get so sad thinking about what we lost. There it was, the manipulation. So much quieter this time, but just as potent. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of fault. It was a poisoned dart of doubt designed to find its way into the cracks of my resolve. To make me wonder times what if asterisk. To make me share the burden of her destruction. My lawyer nudged the papers. Mr. Hayes. I looked at Anna's sad, beautiful, broken face. The woman I had loved. The woman who had systematically torn my world apart and then blamed me for the rubble. She wasn't offering a future. She was just trying to pull me back into her misery to make sure I was as unsettled as she was. I took a deep breath, the air tasting like stale regret. I signed my name. Each letter was a small act of violence, a final severing. I stood up and walked out of that room without looking back. I was legally free. But as the elevator doors closed, her words echoed in my head. Asterisk, maybe we gave up too easily. Asterisk, I knew it was a lie. I knew I had done the only thing I could. But the doubt was there, a tiny, toxic seed she had planted right at the finish line. I wasn't in hell anymore, but this wasn't freedom. It was just purgatory. The first thing the nurse said was, "Oh, look at all that hair." I was exhausted, floating in that weird, surreal space between agony and euphoria. Liam, my husband, was right by my side, his hand gripping mine. He leaned over his blonde hair, falling into his eyes, and looked at our son for the first time. "He's perfect, Danny," he whispered, his voice thick. And he was. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a full, shocking head of dark, almost black hair. I didn't think anything of it. I have red hair. Liam is blonde. Genetics are a lottery. I just saw my baby. My son. Our son. But Liam's smile faltered. He stared at the baby, then back at me. His blue eyes, usually so warm, turned to chips of ice. What I asked, my own smile fading. He pulled his hand away. "Whose is he?" The words didn't register. The nurse was busy with the baby, the doctor was finishing up, the room was a blur of medical efficiency. "What are you talking about, Liam?" "The hair, Danielle," he said, his voice low and sharp. "Look at it. It's black. We're a redhead and a blonde. Do you think I'm an idiot?" My heart stopped. The post-birth high vanished, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. "It's called recessive genes, you moron. My grandmother had black hair." "I've never met your grandmother," he hissed. The head nurse looked over, her brow furrowed. "Liam, stop it. You're making a scene." "No, I want to know who you were screwing." His voice was rising now, cracking with a wild accusatory rage I'd never heard before. "I work 60 hours a week to give you this life, and you go and—" "Sir," the nurse said, stepping between us, You need to calm down or I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm not going anywhere until she tells me the truth," he roared. That was it. 2 security guards were there in an instant, flanking him. He was still yelling as they escorted him out, his face purple with rage. "It's not mine! That baby is not mine!" The door swung shut, leaving me in a sterile, silent room with my newborn son, whose dark hair was matted with the residue of his own birth. And I just started to cry. The next month was a special kind of hell reserved for women in bad Lifetime movies. The story, Liam's version of it, spread like a virus. His family showed up at the hospital, his mother Carol refusing to even look at me, let alone hold her new grandson, Leo. She just stood in the doorway and whispered to my own mother, "We'll be praying for her soul." When I got home, the house was empty. Liam was staying with his parents. The nursery we'd painted together, a soft yellow with puffy white clouds, felt like a mausoleum. Friends from church dropped off casseroles with notes that said things like, "God's grace is sufficient in all trials," which was church speak. "For you're a dirty harlot, but here's some tuna noodle." I was ostracized. People I'd known my whole life would see me in the grocery store and immediately get fascinated by a can of creamed corn in the next aisle. The prayer circle I used to be a part of sent me a group text saying they were praying for Liam's strength and my repentance. I was drowning. Sleep-deprived, hormonal, and utterly alone, trying to keep a tiny human alive while my entire world branded a scarlet A on my chest. I sent Liam articles about genetics, diagrams, pictures of my dark-haired grandmother. He ignored them all. His only communication came through his mother. "Liam just wants the truth, Danielle," she'd say over the phone, her voice dripping with false piety. "Confession is good for the soul." After 4 weeks of this, I snapped. I was sitting on the floor, covered in spit up. Leo was screaming, and I hadn't showered in 2 days. I texted Liam, "Get a paternity test, or I'm filing for full custody and you'll never see him again. Your choice." He agreed within the hour. The trip to the lab was the most excruciatingly silent car ride of my life. He refused to look at me. He glanced at Leo in his car seat with an expression of pure disgust. The nurse who took our swabs was overly cheerful, and I wanted to punch her. The week we waited for the results was even worse. The silence was heavier, loaded with the weight of what was to come. Then the email arrived. I opened it with a trembling hand. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I just felt a profound, hollow emptiness. I forwarded the email to Liam, to his mother, his father, and our pastor. The subject line was, "Just a period." The switch flipped so fast it gave me whiplash. First, a text from Liam. "Oh." Then 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Carol. "Danielle, honey, she cooed like the past month never happened. Liam is just devastated. He feels so awful. You know how he gets. He was just in shock. He loves you so, so much." I hung up on her. Then Liam called. I let it go to voicemail. "Danny, baby, please pick up. I'm so sorry. I am the biggest idiot in the world. I was scared. I wasn't thinking. I love you. I love our son. Please just let me come home. We can fix this." His apology was all about him. His shock, his fear, his feelings. Not a word about the public humiliation, the isolation, the baseless accusation that had torn my life apart in the most vulnerable moment a woman can experience. I called my brother, Alex. "Can you come get me?" He was there in 20 minutes. I packed 2 suitcases for me and Leo and left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter right next to a cold, uneaten casserole. Moving into Alex's spare room felt like coming up for air. It was small, but it was sane. For 2 days there was peace. Then the siege began. An endless barrage of calls, texts, and voicemails. From Liam, "I'll do anything. Please don't take my son away from me." From Carol, "A family belongs together. Forgiveness is a Christian virtue, Danielle." From Pastor John, "Do not let pride harden your heart against your husband. The Lord calls us to reconcile." I blocked all their numbers. They started messaging me on Facebook. I deactivated my account. I was finally starting to feel safe. I was feeding Leo in the quiet of Alex's living room, the evening sun slanting through the blinds. My phone, which I'd put on silent, lit up on the table. A text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read it. "We're not giving up on you, Danielle. Your family needs you. Your church needs you. We're coming over to pray with you. You need guidance." Then a heavy, authoritative knock rattled the front door. Another one followed, louder and more insistent, echoing through the small apartment. Alex wasn't home. I clutched Leo a little tighter, his small warm body a shield against the thudding on the door. I peered through the peephole. My stomach plummeted. It was Carol, my mother-in-law, her face a mask of grim determination. Beside her stood Pastor John, his hands clasped in front of him like a disappointed God. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wouldn't answer. I would just wait until they went away. "Danielle, we know you're in there." Carol's voice cut through the wood, sharp and thin. "We're not leaving. Open this door." My silence only seemed to empower them. Pastor John's deeper voice joined in. "We're here to help you, Danielle. Don't shut out the people who love you." Leo stirred, letting out a soft whimper. That was it. My cover was blown. Taking a deep breath, I walked back and cracked the door open just enough to speak through the chain. "You need to leave." "Don't be ridiculous," Carol snapped and shoved. The flimsy chain lock groaned and the door swung inward, hitting the wall with a thud. They were inside. Just like that. They filled the small entryway of Alex's apartment, bringing the scent of stale church coffee and cloying perfume with them. I stumbled back into the living room, a cornered animal. "This has gone on long enough." Carol began taking a step towards me. "Liam is a broken man. He made a mistake. A good Christian wife forgives her husband and keeps her family together. He publicly accused me of adultery moments after I gave birth," I said, my voice shaking. "He abandoned his son. That's not a mistake, that's a character flaw." Pastor John stepped forward, adopting a placating tone that made my skin crawl. "The Lord's path is one of reconciliation, Danielle. Pride is a sin. Your pride is keeping this family from healing. It's keeping your son from his father." My pride, I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You think this is about pride? This is about being treated like a human being. You all stood by and watched him burn my life to the ground over a high school biology lesson you were apparently all sick for. His serene facade cracked. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, righteous fire. You are hardening your heart against God's will. To reject your husband, to break your sacred vows over a moment of human weakness, that is the path to ruin. You are risking your eternal soul, Danielle. Do you want your son to be raised by a mother who would choose anger over grace? Who invites damnation into her home? Damnation. The word hung in the air heavy and suffocating. This wasn't an intervention. This was an exorcism. And I was the demon. Leo started to fuss, his little face scrunching up for a real cry. He needs to be changed, I mumbled, my only thought, a desperate clawing need to escape the room. I backed away down the short hallway towards the bathroom. They let me go, their expressions smug as if my retreat was a sign of submission. I slipped inside, locked the door with a trembling hand, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. My breath came in ragged gasps. I looked at myself in the mirror, wild-eyed, pale, a stranger. Then I looked down at Leo, who was now quietly staring up at me, his dark eyes wide and trusting. I pulled out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen as I dialed 911. 911? What's your emergency? I kept my voice to a choked whisper. There are 2 people in my apartment. They forced their way in and they won't leave. I'm locked in the bathroom with my baby. I'm at 1425 Elm Street, apartment 3B. After I hung up the silence outside, the door felt menacing. I could hear them murmuring. Carol's voice, clear as a bell, she's just being dramatic for attention. Minutes later, a new authoritative knock sounded from the front door. Not theirs. The police. I heard muffled voices, the confident baritone of an officer and Pastor John's indignant sputtering. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and walked out, Leo still cradled in my arms. 2 police officers stood in the living room. Carol and Pastor John looked aghast, their faces a mixture of shock and outrage. The neighbor across the hall was peering out her door, her eyes wide. "Ma'am, you called," the taller officer asked gently. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "These 2 people pushed their way into my home and refused to leave when I asked. They were threatening me." Threatening Pastor John blustered his face, turning a blotchy red. "We were offering spiritual counsel. We were praying with her." The officer turned his flat, unimpressed gaze on him. "Sir, were you asked to leave the premises?" "This is a family matter," Carol interjected, her voice shrill. "We're her family." "This isn't your property, ma'am," the officer said, his patience gone. "You were told to go. So go." He gestured toward the open door. Defeated and humiliated, they shuffled out, shooting me looks of pure venom. As the door closed, locking them out, a profound, trembling silence fell over the apartment. Then my phone buzzed. And it didn't stop. It was a tidal wave. Texts from Liam's, cousins from women in the church prayer circle, from numbers I didn't even recognize. Alex's iPad, which was logged into my Facebook, lit up with message notifications. It was an assault. "I heard you called the police on Pastor John. Have you completely lost your mind?" You need to call Carol and apologize. You embarrassed her for no reason. Liam made one mistake in a moment of shock, and you call the cops on his mother. You are the problem here, Danielle. You're the idiot who went nuclear. The narrative had been twisted in a matter of minutes. I was no longer the wronged wife. I was the unhinged, unforgiving shrew who called the authorities on a pastor and her loving mother-in-law during a wellness check. The sheer weight of it was crushing. My confidence shattered. Did I go too far? Was there another way? The doubt was a poison seeping into the cracks of my resolve. I sank onto the couch, the phone still vibrating manically on the cushion beside me. It buzzed with a new text message. Liam's name flashed on the screen. You called the cops on my mother. What the hell is wrong with you? My stepmom, Ariel, is the human equivalent of a glitter bomb. She looks fun from a distance, but the moment she's in your life, she gets everywhere and is impossible to get rid of. She's only 12 years older than me, a fact she loves to remind everyone of, usually while wearing something I would have been sent home from school for. We're more like sisters, right, Isla? She'd say, winking at my dad. I'm 16. She's 28. We are not sisters. Her immaturity was almost charming at first. Then it curdled. She had this way of making little jokes that weren't jokes at all. When my best friend Maya came over, Ariel called her spicy because her family is from Colombia. When I mentioned I aced my history final, she said, "Wow, good for you. I was never a nerd like that." Everything was a backhanded compliment or a thinly veiled insult wrapped in a bubblegum-scented giggle. But the real problem, the one that made my skin crawl, was my diary. It's a plain black moleskin, the kind with the elastic band. It's the one place I can be completely brutally honest. It's my pressure release valve. And Ariel was reading it. I first knew for sure about a month ago. I'd written about how anxious I was to ask Liam Jensen to the winter formal. I detailed my whole ridiculous, mortifying plan to casually leave a note in his locker. The next day, Ariel was making a smoothie and said completely out of the blue, "You know, you should just be direct with boys. All that locker note stuff is so junior high. Just ask him. What's the worst that can happen?" My blood went cold. I'd never spoken a word of that plan to anyone. I just stared at her, the blender whirring. She smiled oblivious. Just some big sister advice. That night I confronted her. I found her in the living room, scrolling through Instagram, her acrylic nails tapping on the screen. "Did you go in my room today, Ariel?" She didn't look up. "Nope. Been super busy." Tap. "You read my diary." It wasn't a question. Her head snapped up, her perfectly glossed lips forming a little O of fake surprise. "What, Isla? Why would you even say that I would never invade your privacy? Don't lie to me. You mentioned the locker note. I never told you about that." She actually laughed. A high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, sweetie, you probably told me and forgot. You're always talking about that boy." It was so infuriatingly dismissive. I turned and went straight to my dad. He was in his home office staring at a spreadsheet. "Dad, Ariel is reading my diary." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose without taking his eyes off the screen. "Isla, we've talked about this. You need to give her a chance." "This has nothing to do with giving her a chance. This is about my privacy." She knew something I only wrote down in my diary. She's lying to my face about it. Ariel wouldn't do that, he said, his voice flat. She's trying so hard to connect with you. Maybe you mentioned it and don't remember. You've been under a lot of stress lately. And there it was. The gaslighting. It was my fault. I was stressed. I was forgetful. I was the problem. Ariel, the victim, was just trying times so hard, asterisk. So, you're not going to do anything, I asked, my voice shaking. There's nothing to do, he said, finally looking at me. Stop trying to start fights with her, Isla. I'm tired of it. I felt like I'd been slapped. I went back to my room, my sanctuary that now felt like a stage, and took the diary from my nightstand. Fine. If they wouldn't respect my privacy, I'd force them to. My first hiding spot was classic under the mattress. It lasted 2 days. I knew she'd found it because I came home and my bed, which I never make, was made perfectly. It was a taunt. Next, I got creative. I had an old thick copy of Time's Moby Dick Times that I'd hollowed out for a school project years ago. I tucked the diary inside, placed it back on the shelf between 2 other boring-looking classics, and felt a flicker of triumph. There was no way. The next afternoon, Ariel was telling my dad a story over dinner. And it was just so boring I felt like I was chasing a white whale or something. She glanced at me and smirked. My fork clattered onto my plate. She'd found it. She'd read it. And now she was mocking me in code right in front of my dad, who just chuckled at her clever metaphor, completely oblivious. I felt helpless. Trapped. I was a prisoner in my own home, and the warden was a woman who used Snapchat filters in her work headshots. My dad, my own father, was her willing deputy, convinced I was the troublemaker. Reason didn't work. Pleading didn't work. Hiding things didn't work. My words meant nothing to them. If they wouldn't listen to my words, maybe they'd listen to hers. An idea started to form in my mind. A nasty, brilliant, terrible idea. If the diary was a stage, I would write the script. I would give Ariel the drama she was so desperate to find. And I would make sure the explosion was big enough that my dad couldn't ignore it. I wasn't just going to prove she was snooping. I was going to make them both regret it. Poetic justice. The plan needed a co-star. Michael, our next-door neighbor, was perfect. He's a friendly divorced architect in his late 40s who always waves, brings our garbage cans in if we forget, and has a perfectly manicured lawn. He and my dad were grill buddies. They'd drink beers over the fence and complain about property taxes. He was the most boring, predictable man on the planet, which made him the perfect candidate for a scandal. That night I sat at my desk, a fresh page open in my moleskin. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mix of terror and exhilarating fury. I took a deep, shaky breath and started to write. I didn't just write an entry. I crafted a masterpiece of teenage angst and devastating discovery. Asterisk. I can't believe it. I can't even write this. My hands are shaking. I came home early from school today and I heard noises from my parents' room. I thought it was Dad and Ariel, so I was going to just go to my room, but I heard Dad's voice and a man's voice. It was Michael from next door. I hid in the hallway and I saw them. I saw everything. I don't know what to do. My dad is having an affair with our neighbor. I feel like I'm going to be sick. Asterisk. It was perfect. Just enough detail to be convincing, just enough shock value to guarantee a nuclear reaction. I made sure to dot the page with a few carefully placed teardrop stains using a bit of water. Theatricality was key. I closed the book, the black cover, feeling heavy with potential energy. I slid it back into the hollowed-out Times, Moby Dick Times, but this time I didn't push the book all the way back into the shelf. I left it sticking out. Just an inch. A silent invitation. A dare. The next day dragged on forever. Every creak of the house made me jump. Finally, after school, I was in my room pretending to do homework, my door cracked just enough to see the hallway. My ears were straining, listening. Then I heard it. The soft padding of footsteps on the runner. They stopped right outside my door. Silence. I held my breath. A floorboard outside my room gave a familiar telltale groan. She was here. She was taking the bait. The book scraped against the shelf. A soft thud as it was pulled free. I heard the elastic band snap back. The rustle of a page turning. Then another. Then a sharp, choked intake of breath. It was silent for a full 10 seconds. It was the loudest silence I had ever heard. The footsteps outside my door didn't pad away. They pounded. They thundered down the stairs like an elephant in stilettos. Gary. Ariel's shriek ripped through the quiet of the house. It wasn't her usual pouty whine. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure rage. I scrambled from my desk to my window, which overlooked the front lawn and conveniently Michael's driveway. The show was about to begin. My dad's muffled voice floated up from his office. "Ariel, what's wrong? I'm on a call." "Get out here, Gary, now." I saw him emerge onto the front porch, his cell phone still pressed to his ear, a look of weary annoyance on his face. "I'll have to call you back," he mumbled into the phone before pocketing it. "What is all this screaming about?" Ariel burst out the front door, her face a blotchy, tear-streaked mess. She was clutching my diary to her chest like it was a holy relic. The black moleskin. Exhibit A. "Don't you play dumb with me," she wailed, pointing a trembling acrylic-nailed finger at him. "You pig, you disgusting pig." My dad's face went from annoyed to utterly baffled. "What are you talking about? Are you drunk?" "I'm talking about him," she screamed, pivoting and stabbing her finger towards Michael's house. Michael, bless his punctual, boring heart, was just getting out of his car, holding a bag of groceries. He gave a friendly little wave. Ariel saw the wave, and it was like gasoline on a bonfire. "You!" she shrieked, launching herself off the porch and stomping across our lawn, leaving divots in the grass with her heels. "You, home wrecker!" Michael froze his kale sticking out of the paper bag. Neighbors who had been watering plants or getting their mail suddenly found reasons to linger outside. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down practically had her binoculars out. "Ariel, for God's sake, get back here," my dad hissed. Jogging after her, his face turning a deep, horrified crimson. "I know what you've been doing," Ariel screamed at a bewildered Michael. "In my house, in my bed, with my husband." Michael just stared, his mouth hanging open. He looked from Ariel's contorted face to my dad's panicked one. "Gary, what is she talking about?" "She's having..." I don't know, some kind of episode, Dad said, grabbing Ariel's arm. She shook him off with surprising strength. Don't you touch me! Isla saw you! She saw everything! Ariel shrieked, finally brandishing the diary like a weapon. It's all in here! She wrote it all down. And there it was. The checkmate. My dad's eyes flickered from the diary in her hand to her apoplectic face, then up towards my bedroom window. Our eyes met. In that single sickening moment, he understood. The confusion on his face dissolved, replaced by a cold, hard fury I had never seen before. He knew. He knew exactly what had happened. He wasn't mad at Ariel for the accusation. He was mad at me for the proof. The dam of his denial had just been blown to smithereens, and I was holding the dynamite. He turned back to Ariel, his voice dangerously low. Ariel, give me the book. So you can destroy the evidence, she sobbed. Give it to me and get inside the house, now. The scene de-escalated quickly after that. My dad half-dragged, half-carried a still-sobbing Ariel back into our house, throwing a frantic, apologetic look over his shoulder at Michael, who was still standing by his car like a statue. The neighborhood audience slowly, reluctantly dispersed. The show was over. The fallout was about to begin. I sat on my bed, my heart hammering, and waited. 10 minutes later, my dad opened my door. He didn't knock. He was holding my diary, his knuckles white. How could you? He asked, his voice shaking with a rage that was far more terrifying than Ariel's hysterics. I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye. I told you she was reading it. This isn't about her reading it, this is about you. Humiliating this family in front of the entire neighborhood. You concocted an insane, disgusting lie. And she believed it. I cut him off. She believed it instantly and ran with it because she found it in my private diary. The diary I told you she was reading. The diary you told me I was being paranoid about. The diary you told me to stop starting fights over. Do you believe me now, Dad? He had no answer. He just stood there, the open diary in his hand, the truth of the situation warring with his fury at me. He had been proven wrong utterly and completely. He had chosen to believe his new wife over his own daughter, and she had just rewarded his trust by accusing him of having a gay affair on the front lawn for everyone to see. You're grounded, he finally choked out the words, sounding lame even to him. For a month. No phone. Fine, I said. It was worth it. The next 24 hours were a blur of angry phone calls. My dad's sister, my Aunt Carol, called to tell me I was a malicious, destructive little brat who owed Ariel and my father a massive apology. My paternal grandparents left a voicemail saying they were deeply disappointed in my behavior. To them, the issue wasn't the invasion of privacy. It was the public shame. The fact that I had exposed the ugly truth was far worse than the ugly truth itself. But then my mom called. I picked up the landline in the kitchen, my dad glaring at me from the living room. I heard there was some drama, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I told her everything. The whole story from the locker note comment to the Moby Dick taunt to the final explosive entry. When I was done, there was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she burst out laughing. It was a full, deep laugh of pure delight. "Oh, honey," she said, catching her breath. "That's my girl. A little scorched earth maybe, but absolutely brilliant. He never listened to you about her, did he?" "Never," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "Well, maybe he'll listen now," she said. "He made his choice, Isla. He chose to protect her feelings over your privacy. You just handed him the bill for that choice. I'm proud of you." Hanging up, I felt a strange sense of calm. I was grounded. My dad and his entire side of the family hated me. Ariel was locked in her room, probably plotting how to poison my food. But I was vindicated. I had pulled back the curtain and shown the world, or at least our cul-de-sac, exactly what our perfect little family looked like. They couldn't gaslight me anymore. They couldn't pretend I was the crazy one. I had the proof written in teardrop-stained ink and screamed across 2 front lawns. I walked past my dad and went up to my room. He didn't say a word. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe in my own house. The glitter bomb had detonated, and I was the only one left standing. The house on Elm Street was Sarah's idea. A small 2-bedroom brick thing with a decent yard and a leaky faucet. She swore we could fix ourselves. We bought it the year our son Leo turned 10. It was an investment, she said, a foothold for his future. "Imagine him," she'd said, standing in the empty living room, her voice echoing slightly, "bringing someone home here, starting his own life. It'll be his." It was Times Our Times plan. A promise sealed over cheap pizza on the dusty hardwood floor. Then Sarah got sick. The plan, the promise, the future, it all got packed away with her things. For a few years, the house on Elm Street was just a line item on a bank statement, a rental property managed by a company I never spoke to. It was a ghost. Then I met Anna. She wasn't a ghost. She was vibrant, pragmatic, a financial advisor who organized our lives into spreadsheets. She pulled me out of the gray fog I'd been living in. We got married. We bought a bigger house, a Times Our Times house. The house on Elm Street remained a quiet, unresolved chord in the background of our new life. The first real fight came on a Tuesday. Anna was scrolling through real estate listings, a glass of wine in her hand. "The market is insane right now, Holden," she said, not looking up from her screen. "We could get 400, maybe 450 for the Elm Street place. Cash offer, probably." I felt my jaw tighten. "We're not selling it." She finally looked at me, a little crease between her brows. "Why not? It's an asset. We could roll that into our retirement, pay off this mortgage faster." "It's for Leo," I said, the words tasting like old dust. "Sarah and we bought it for him." Anna sighed. It was a controlled patient sound she used with difficult clients. That was then. I understand the sentiment, I really do. But we have a future to build together. That money could do so much for Times Us asterisk. It's not about the money. It's a promise, I said. The conversation was over. For that night, anyway. But it wasn't over. It became a low hum of resentment. Every time a repair bill came for the rental, she'd mention how much we could save by selling. Every time we planned a vacation, she'd eye the budget and say, "If only we had a little more liquidity." She saw a number. An asset. I saw the last piece of a promise I made to my dead wife for our only son. The fear that she'd somehow wear me down, that her relentless logic would chip away at my resolve, got the better of me. I went to a lawyer. A week later, a thick envelope came in the mail. Anna got to it before I did. I walked into the kitchen to find her standing at the counter, a single sheet of paper trembling in her hand. Her face was pale. "What the hell is this, Holden?" I didn't have to look. I knew. "It's a quitclaim deed." "I can read," she snapped. "You put Leo's name on the deed. You gave him half the house." I put his name on it with mine. Joint tenancy. It protects his inheritance. It's his Anna. It was always going to be his. Her voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. It was our time's asset. It was part of this family's net worth. You just gave away over $200,000 of our money without even having the decency to speak to me about it. It wasn't our money, it was mine and Sarah's. The words were out before I could stop them. They hung in the air, ugly and sharp. The color drained completely from her face. She didn't say another word. She just folded the paper, placed it on the counter, and walked out. That was the real beginning of the Cold War. The house on Elm Street was a forbidden topic, a landmine in the middle of our living room we both learned to step around. She never mentioned selling it again, and I never mentioned the promise. We just coexisted the silence on that one topic, growing heavier each year. Then last spring, Leo brought Chloe over for dinner. He had that goofy, terrified look on his face that a man only gets when he's about to make the biggest decision of his life. A month later, he showed us the ring. They were getting married. A week ago, he called me. "Dad, can we talk? Just you and me?" We met for a beer. He looked nervous, clutching his glass like it was a life raft. He was 26, a good man with a good job, but he had that kid in the principal's office look. So Chloe and I have been talking. He started tracing a wet circle on the table. We're trying to save up, but with the wedding, well, you know how it is. Rent is a killer. I just nodded, waiting. "The house," he said finally, looking me in the eye. "The one on Elm Street. I know the plan was always for it to be mine someday. But I don't want a handout. We want to do this the right way." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It was a proposal. He and Chloe wanted to move in. They'd pay us a fair market, rent a little under what the current tenants were paying so they could still save. And his 5-year plan was to buy out my half of the equity. It was responsible. It was smart. It was everything a father could want to see from his son. It was even a plan Anna couldn't possibly argue with. We'd still get the income, and the asset would eventually be liquidated. It was the perfect compromise. I looked at my son. I saw his mother's eyes, the same earnest hope she had when we first stood in that empty house. I saw her dream right there in front of me, about to be turned into a business transaction. A 5-year plan, a rental agreement. And I just couldn't do it. "No," I said. Leo's face fell. "Oh, okay. I mean, if it's a bad time..." "No, son, that's not what I mean." I pushed his proposal back across the table. "You're not paying me a dime in rent. Your mom, she wanted that house to be your start, not a burden. You move in. You make it your home. Just cover the taxes and the insurance, that's it. It's yours." The relief that washed over his face was staggering. It was like I'd lifted the weight of the world off his shoulders. He launched himself across the booth and hugged me, a real, unself-conscious bear hug, the kind he hadn't given me since he was 12. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered. "Thank you." Driving home, I felt good. Right. For the first time in a long time, the promise I made to Sarah felt clean, whole. The cold knot of dread in my stomach only started to form when I pulled into the driveway. I walked in through the kitchen. Anna was at the island, her laptop open. Of course, she was looking at our budget spreadsheet. The soft glow of the screen illuminated her focused expression. She didn't look up when I came in. "Hey," she said, her fingers still tapping on the keyboard. "I talked to Leo. He told me the news. That's great." Her voice was flat, all business. "I'm just updating the budget now. The current tenants are out at the end of the month, so we'll only lose a few weeks' income. Starting in June. What did you two agree on? $2,000 a month?" I leaned against the counter, the good feeling from seeing my son so happy evaporating under the fluorescent kitchen lights. "He's not paying rent, Anna." She stopped typing. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. She didn't look at me, just stared at the glowing numbers on her screen. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "I must have misheard you. It sounded like you said you just threw away $24,000 a year." "It's not throwing it away. It's giving my son a start. The start his mother and I always planned for him." She finally turned her face a mask of disbelief. "His mother is dead, Holden. She is dead, and I am your wife. And you just made a massive financial decision for times our times family, for times our times budget without me." The disbelief cracked, and pure hot anger poured through. "Are you a massive idiot?" "It's not your money to decide what to do with," I shot back, my own anger flaring. "It's from a house Sarah and I bought." "Oh, here we go." She threw her hands up, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping her lips. "The shrine to Saint Sarah. The house is a marital asset, Holden. When you married me, your assets became our assets. That's how partnership works. The income from that house pays for this one. It pays for our car insurance. It was earmarked for the new roof we need next year. What you just did wasn't a gift. It was theft. You stole from our future. That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Her voice lowered, taking on a sharp clinical edge. The financial advisor was back, but this time her analysis was aimed at me. Unilaterally making major financial decisions that negatively impact your spouse. Withholding shared income streams without discussion or consent. Prioritizing a past family over your current one. Do you know what that's called, Holden? It has a name. It's financial abuse. The words hit me like a physical blow. Abuse? Are you insane? I gave my son a gift. You took from me. From us. To give to him, he had a plan, a good plan. He was going to pay us rent. And you, in your infinite sentimental wisdom, decided to play the hero on my dime. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I had to fix this, find a logical way out. "Okay, look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're right. I'm sorry. I should have talked to you first. But the decision is made. So let's solve the money problem. This house is too big for us anyway. We could sell it downsized. Buy something smaller and have enough left over to buy a condo to rent out. We'd replace the income. Maybe even increase it. I thought it was a good solution. A practical one. An olive branch. Anna just stared at me. The anger on her face curdled into something else, something colder, and full of contempt. "You selfish idiot," she said, each word a perfectly enunciated drop of venom. "You think this is about the money now. You think you can just replace it with another asset on your little ledger. You made a promise to me when we got married. And you just proved that promise means less than one you made to a ghost?" She closed her laptop with a soft final click. She walked past me, not even a brush of her arm against mine, and went upstairs. I heard our bedroom door shut. Not slammed. Shut. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. A single coffee mug was in the sink. The silence in the house was a living thing. It was heavier than shouting, deeper than tears. It was the sound of a foundation cracking. For 3 days we were ghosts to each other. We moved through the same space but never at the same time. If I was in the kitchen, she was in the living room. If she came upstairs, I suddenly found a reason to go down. We communicated through post-it notes about bills and text messages about groceries. Asterisk. Need milk. Did you pay the electric times? There was no anger in them. There was nothing. I was miserable. Every time I thought of Leo's joyful face, the feeling was immediately soured by the image of Anna's contempt. Had I been a selfish idiot, I didn't feel like one. I felt like a father. But my wife looked at me like I was a stranger, a hostile business partner who'd just staged a corporate raid. On the 4th day, I came home from work, determined to break the silence, to apologize again, to beg if I had to. The house was quiet. I found her in the home office, the room she'd claimed as her own, filled with financial textbooks and framed diplomas. She was on her laptop, a glass of wine on the desk beside her. She didn't look up. "Anna, we have to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. She held up a single finger, her eyes still on the screen. "One moment. I'm just finishing something." I waited. The silence stretched. Finally, she took a slow sip of her wine, turned and looked at me. Her expression was neutral, eerily calm. "Okay," she said. "I'm finished." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down. It was an email notification. An alert from our joint savings account. Asterisk. A transfer in the amount of $87,451.32 has been successfully completed. Asterisk. My blood ran cold. I looked from my phone to her face. She didn't flinch. "What did you do?" I whispered. "I did what any good financial advisor would recommend," she said, her voice as flat and cool as a marble countertop. "When faced with a volatile, unpredictable asset, one must diversify and protect one's own capital. You took half the money." "I took my times half," she corrected. "I moved it into a new account. One that's just in my name. You made it very clear that you feel entitled to make unilateral decisions with our shared finances. You did it to protect your promise. I'm simply doing it to protect my future." She took another sip of wine, her eyes holding mine. "The house on Elm Street was worth what, 200 grand? When you put Leo's name on it, you gave away your half. $100,000. This is just me balancing the books.